It's Halloween, but more importantly, we are just 5 days away from a national election that will give us a new president. Don't worry, I'm not going to get political, but I am going to talk about presidents and fishing. There's a bigger connection there than many realize, and that's a good thing. When our nation's leaders have an interest in the sport that we all love, it should be good for us. And most of our presidents have fished, at least a little, at least when it was politically expedient or they wanted to look the part of the common man. George Washington, our first president, fished both recreationally and commercially. Chester Arthur was our 21st president and once held an Atlantic salmon record for a fish he caught in Canada. Theodore Roosevelt, our 26th president, was a great outdoorsman, but he did most of his fishing at a very young age and turned mostly to hunting as an adult. Calvin Coolidge was our 30th president. He was something of an angler, but he always insisted that one of his Secret Service agents bait his hook and unhook any fish he caught. It's hard for me to take that very seriously. Jimmy Carter, our 39th president, became an avid fly fisherman while in the White House. He even tied his own flies and wrote a book about his outdoor experiences. George H.W. Bush, our 41st president, had a real passion for fishing, including bass fishing. While in office, he was once photographed walking from Air Force One, carrying a copy of Bassmaster magazine, which he said was his favorite publication. In 1980, when Bush first ran for president, he was endorsed by BASS founder Ray Scott, who used a lot of ink to promote Bush for president. I turned 18 that year, so I was able to vote for the very first time. And I remember casting my vote in the Republican primary for George Bush, because Ray Scott said that was the right thing to do. BASS wasn't afraid to take a political stand like that under Ray Scott. Of course, George Bush lost the nomination to Ronald Reagan in 1980, but took the vice president's spot on the ticket, and they were elected twice. After 8 years as vice president, Bush was elected president in 1988, and he and Ray Scott remained close for the rest of their lives. But if you want to judge presidents by their interest in fishing, and particularly bass fishing, you can ignore Washington, Arthur, Roosevelt, Coolidge, Carter, Bush, and 38 others. By far, the fishingest president and the bass fishingest president was Grover Cleveland, who was our 22nd and 24th president. That's right. After being elected in 1884, he lost his re-election bid in 1888 to Benjamin Harrison, but was elected again in 1892, and he won the popular vote all three times. Grover Cleveland was a Democrat, born in Caldwell, New Jersey, and fittingly, he was a Pisces. He was a lifelong angler and very serious about it. One of his regular fishing partners wrote, "Grover Cleveland will fish when it shines and fish when it rains. I have seen him pull bass up in a lively thunderstorm and refuse to be driven from a Cape Cod pond by the worst hailstorm I ever witnessed or suffered. He will fish through hunger and heat, lightning and tempest. This, I have discovered, is the secret of Cleveland luck. It is hard work and no let up." Cleveland was a hardcore angler, but no purist. He used all kinds of gear, and he was not shy about using live bait. In fact, his favorite bait for bass was a live frog. He said and wrote a lot of memorable things about fish and fishing. I encourage you to look him up. But I want to close this monologue with something he wrote nearly 120 years ago, which is just as apt today as we're facing another national election. Cleveland wrote, "In these sad and ominous days, every patriotic, thoughtful citizen, whether he fishes or not, should lament that we have not among our countrymen more fishermen." Amen. Welcome to Bass After Dark. I'm Ken Duke, and we are here tonight to earn your support, your subscription, your like, your share, and hopefully your trust by showing you that inch for inch and pound for pound, we are the most illuminating show in bass fishing. Now it's time to bring in my co-host. I'm not sure if his stories about the size of the bass he catches are true or not, because he measures everything in board feet. Please welcome Bryan the Carpenter.
Pounds, baby.
Pounds, baby.
Measure them in pounds.
Loving the costume. Bryan Thrift.
Yes.
Indiana Thrift. Because of the hat there, it's almost an Indiana Jones. I like it.
It's what I could fit on there to hold the mask in place just long enough to introduce our guests. And I'm dying. I can't drink with this thing on, and I'm very thirsty, parched.
If you can't drink with that thing on, I know it won't last long.
It's not going to last long.
No, not at all.
Who else is a Pisces from New Jersey, Ken Duke?
Brian the Carpenter is a Pisces from Joyzy.
Yeah. And I'll fish in some inclement weather.
Hailstorms, the likes of which you have never seen or tolerated before.
Ooh, my stick's hanging out. All right.
Advocate bass fishing in a hailstorm. Sounds painful.
Hey, they bite when it snows. I'll tell you that.
That's a good point. I'm not saying I don't get out there in bad weather. If there's a hurricane coming, I'm usually out there right before it.
Yeah. Yeah. Battening down the windows and hatches.
That barometer starts to fall.
Yes.
Sometimes they really go.
So, dying of thirst over here. We have, guys, tonight, how to fish, or how do you fish a spook? We've got some pretty amazing guests. An absolute legend of the sport, topwater legend, faux show, a very, very recent winner, and a feller from Texas.
A feller from Texas who's a Bassmaster Magazine cover boy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Tonight we have, after we talk about that spooky content, we've got bad news. You guys, I think we've rolled that out once already. Going to love it.
We've done that once, and it's good stuff. I'm excited about that. That's going to be cool. We've also got some sponsors we want to talk about here. The folks who support the show. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And our top 10 tonight.
Oh, yeah. We got a top 10.
Yes.
And it's
top 10 reasons the world record is a trick.
The George Perry world record is a fraud.
Yes.
Not the Manabu Kurita record, which is legit. Indeed. Let me mention our friends at Livingston Lures. The electronic bait fish sound technology, the EBS sound technology, triggers natural instinctive feeding cues of fish. Unlike most of your traditional lures, which you've got to move or hop or shake in order to have them make noise because they rely on beads or rattles, Livingston Lures have this EBS technology that adds natural sounds of feeding frenzy of bait fish to stress calls that game fish like bass recognize and use to find their forage. Livingston Lures leverage the full range of sensory cues to attract fish, and they call fish even when the lure is not in motion, which is something that other lures can't do. It's a technology difference that will make a difference in your catch rate.
That's right, Ken. And we're also brought to you by the Bass Tank. Bass Tank is your premier boat electronics destination. From beginners to pros, they have all the latest and greatest. Educate you, sell it to you, rig it for you, or teach you how to do it yourself. It's the only resource you need. Check them out at thebasstank.com and follow them on social media for latest deals and discounts. Ken, without further ado, may I?
Please do.
All right. We have, first up, we have a 3-time Elite Series champion. Was that 2 Elite wins and 2 Open wins? Ken.
Let's ask him.
Oh. And a Bassmaster Magazine cover model. We have a feller from Texas, Mr. Lee Livesay.
Lee Livesay, welcome to Bass After Dark, brother.
What's going on? How are y'all?
Outstanding costume,
man.
Bro.
Thank you. Just got out of it.
Yeah, terrifying.
I like the costume, Lee. I recognized you immediately. I think it looks good. It looked good on the cover of Bassmaster Magazine too, brother. So congratulations on that. Long time coming.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Ken.
I hope the sponsors stood up and took notice of that and realized what a good job you do for them in supporting them. You're a great ambassador, not just for those brands, but for the sport generally. And I was thrilled to see you on the cover.
Yep, much appreciated. Thank you, Bass. Thank you, Ken Duke.
Thank you, Bryan the Carpenter.
Indeed. Bryan Thrift. Aren't you Bryan Thrift? You look like Bryan Thrift.
Well,
Who's up next?
Yes, I was thanking Bryan the Carpenter.
Okay.
Next, we have the winner of the very last Forest Wood Cup 2023 Red Crest and yesterday's Team Series Championship MLF team. We've got Bryan Thrift, the fake Bryan Thrift.
What's up?
We got stereo Bryan Thrifts. I like it. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us, man. We appreciate you. Love all the content you create. I got to tell you, you're one of my favorite guys to watch on Bass University or anywhere you're giving up some tips because I really feel like you're giving up the juice when you're out there.
Yeah, I try to. I mean, that's the fun of it. Like you want to give back. The bass fishing community has made a great career for me over the last 18 years, and you got to give it back when it comes time.
Not everybody has that attitude, but I appreciate that you do. That's a statement. It's a statement of the quality of person and professional angler you are. But BTC, you look at Lee Livesay, you look at Bryan Thrift, you think, my God, they couldn't possibly have any more topwater bass fishing talent on a show like this. But au contraire.
5-time bass winner and 16-time Bassmaster Classic qualifier, Mr. Zell Roland, joins the show. You.
What's up, Ken?
Zell Roland, my friend. Welcome to Bass After Dark, brother. We appreciate you coming on so much.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
I got to tell a quick story that not enough people know. In 2005, ESPN did this thing they call the Greatest Angler Debate, and they let people go online and vote for a group of anglers as to who was the greatest all-time tournament angler. And in 2005, it was really a battle between Rick Clunn and Roland Martin. Clunn finished first, Martin was second, third was Dance, fourth was Brower, fifth was Larry Nixon. I'm sorry, it was Kevin Van Dam. And at the end of all that, I was working for BASS at the time, and I said, I'm going to talk to each of these 5 guys who finished on top, and I'm going to ask them not who the greatest angler ever was, but who was the greatest deep crankbait angler, who was the greatest spinnerbait angler, who was the greatest this, that. The only thing they all agreed on was that Zell Rowland was the greatest topwater angler of all time. And I thought, man, that is a resume right there.
Well, shoot, I was honored by them guys doing that. So many guys have so much talent that it's unfortunate that they don't get recognized a lot of times for that talent they got.
Yeah, one of those guys wanted to keep voting for himself in all the different categories, so I had to say, okay, you can't pick yourself.
Wasn't Denny Breyer, Jimmy Houston, was it?
No,
did Kevin pick himself for topwater too?
I'm not going to answer that question because I don't remember. I do not remember that question.
Don't
but
be afraid.
Guys, we're thrilled to have y'all on. Y'all are an amazing panel. This is the dream topwater panel. When we do a show like this, we reach out to the very best of the best, and that's you guys. So we call it a spook show tonight because in honor of Halloween, but we expect to get into some other topwater things too. And BTC.
Yeah, I would kind of set the stage for just how often you guys throw topwater, and how often you're throwing a percentage of that is a walking spook style bait. Start with Lee. Like what percentage of your fishing is topwater, would you say?
Anytime I think, I can catch one on it, because I always feel like I can catch the biggest fish on a topwater, whether it's a frog or a popper or a walking bait. I just feel like bigger fish like to eat up. I've always thought that,
Yeah. How often would you say it's a walking bait?
For me personally, probably about 80% of the time it's a walking bait, just so I can cover a lot more water,
I love what you're saying about the better quality fish on that, Lee. And this is a question for all you guys. I think for at least until swim baits got to be such a big deal, the biggest bait most guys carried in their box was probably a walking style bait, like a spook. We're talking about a bait that's 5.5 inches long or something like that. And if you showed a guy a bait of any other style that was that big, they wouldn't often take it seriously. What is it about that walking style bait being so big is not a deterrent to lure sales? Because the spook's been around for over 100 years.
That'd be a question for Zell.
Zell, I think he called you and me old.
I'm sort of like Lee, when people ask you how often do you throw a topwater bait, if I know I can throw one all day long and get away with it, I will. But a Zell spook, for some reason, I think more of the size of the bait and the action of that bait. A walking bait just draws big fish to it from time to time.
Big fish.
It's a big bait. Brian, how about you? What percentage of your topwater fishing is a walking bait?
I'm gonna probably echo what Lee had to say. Probably 80% of it.
Wow.
Like, it's just my thing about topwater fishing is if I think I can catch one, or if I get to a body of water and the water temp's over 57 degrees, I'm gonna have like 5 different topwaters tied on in practice. Like one side on the deck of the boat's all topwaters. It seems like from that point until the water gets back cold again.
How much of the appeal of a walking style bait is the fact that you're fishing it pretty fast usually, and you're able to cover a lot of water with it versus a twitch bait or something like that?
Right. I think the thing about a walking bait is you can use it in so many different scenarios. Like you can use it to cover water, but you can also walk it in place and actually target fish with it. Like you can pitch it up next to a bush or walkway of a dock, and you can make that bait do a lot in a short area. So that bait can make a lot of commotion and only move forward maybe 10 or 12 inches.
No, I think one of the big things, Ken, is, you got a couple guys on here that are real good at what they do, and that's bass fishing. They've done it for a long, long time. And if they're usually with a topwater bait where it's a little different than, say, a crankbait or something, Lee and Brian, when they're going down the bank, they're going to usually know what and where, when they make that cast, the possibility of that bite's going to come from. And that's, throwing a big walking bait, it just, for some reason or another, it produces a lot bigger bites. And, but it's nothing to be for Brian or Lee to be going down the bank and say, within the next 5 casts, I'm about to hook one, because they'll know where that fish is laying, and they'll know that particular bait's going to draw that fish up to hit it.
I'd love to ask you guys some questions about, there's always been this standard attitude, or at least I'm old. So I got started in the sport in the mid 70s and read everything I could get my hands on. And back in the day, I want to see how many of these things still hold true, because we've learned from forward facing sonar and a lot of other stuff that the things we thought were true are maybe not true. But one of the things they always said about topwater was you want to cast well beyond your target, 6, 8, 10 feet beyond your target. Is everybody on board with that as a standard topwater practice? No, says Bryan Thrift.
Not a school.
All right, Brian, follow up there. The real Bryan Thrift, not the other Bryan Thrift.
I think there's certain scenarios, but I've also seen times where if you're fishing stained water, like especially bushes or dock walkways, when you lay that bait right up next to the bush or right up next to that pole on that walkway, I think it gets their attention, especially on a post spawns type scenario where you maybe got a shad spawn or something like that going on, like where they're actively looking on the surface and looking for those bait fish. I think that actually draws it to it, the actual splash of that bait landing.
I like it. Lee, what were you were about to say something too? Oh,
no. I mean, I'm like totally not even in the category with these two guys. I just get lucky every now and then. I mean,
no, 100 plus pounds says different.
Yeah.
Zell probably doesn't remember this. Zell, a long time ago, there was a trail for 1 year called the Platinum Team Trail in the state of Texas, and you fished it. And I was rooming with a guy named Jerry Silman from Monroe, or he wasn't from Monroe. He was from Louisiana, around Monroe. He lived on Lake Darbone. I don't even remember who you were fishing with, but there was a tournament on Lake Texoma, and you roomed with us. It was me and my partner and you and whoever you fished with then. You probably don't remember that. It was 15 years ago. I was just a little kid. I didn't even have a big boat yet, but Zell got pissed at me because I was throwing a yellow magic.
Uh-oh.
And I tied a loop knot, and he told me, like, why I didn't need to do this, why I didn't need to be throwing yellow magic. and he literally had sandpaper in his pocket. He went over there, cut my bait off the deck of the boat before the tournament, pulled some sandpaper out, sanded on the bill, retied the knot he thought I should have, and said, "Okay, you're good now." So you probably don't remember that. It was probably 15 years ago, but that would be a topwater specialist. Like I said, I just get lucky every now and then. These two guys are specialists.
You know, it's like I told you earlier, Ken. It's like Bryan saying something about where he's going to put the bait on a cast. And, I mean, he knows 9 times out of 10, I mean, especially after he's practiced a few days, he knows and expects that bite to come from a certain area. And he's waiting on it before it happens.
Well, Bryan, I'm guessing when you talk about putting a bait down in a particular place, like along a dock or something like that, you're not just launching that bait high in the air where it comes down like some sort of NASA mission. You're making a little underhand roll cast.
Yeah, you're trying to roll cast it in there and kind of surprise them, I guess you'd say. Just you put it right on their face.
Yeah. And Lee, you were talking about schooling fish, where obviously if there's a melee going on the surface, landing a bait right in the middle of it, that's not going to scare a fish away. It might even draw some attention to them, I guess, in a circumstance like that.
Yeah, there's a million different scenarios, you know, just like me at Chickamauga, the first elite I won on a frog, you know, making a long cast. Same thing with the saltwater spook at Fork. And then, you know, we've seen Thrift on Champlain years ago in FLW, you know, working a walking bait, but really slow. And you know, I'm guessing it was a rock pile and some kind of grass, probably, you know, and just catching fish after fish after fish.
Yeah.
You know,
one hole in the grass. It was about a 10-foot diameter hole.
Yeah, it wasn't like he was throwing it past. He was just working one little target with a spook style bait, whatever it was.
That was a spook. That.
By the way, BTC, I had my best ever personal topwater day in Lee Livesay's boat at Gros Savon a few years ago. There was a frog bite that just would not quit. It was amazing. And,
yeah, that was fun.
But without Lee Livesay, I would not have done nearly as good as I did. But I think I caught about 50 one afternoon on a frog. I'm not even going to tell you how many I missed, but Lee put on a clinic showing me all the things I'd been doing wrong.
That's awesome.
I got some good videos.
Send them my way, please.
No. We don't. Not if I'm on. You don't need to do that. That'll be compromising. We can't have that. All right.
Hold on. I got a follow up for Bryan. What made you choose throwing a topwater bait over top of that fish in that grass hole instead of a jig or something like that?
I think it's just past history. Just I've always caught them good on a walking style bait at Champlain, and that's what the most interesting thing about that tournament and that bite was. I think I went on to finish 3rd or 4th, but the first 2 days of the tournament, it was all smallmouth. I think the first day I made 5 casts and had 19 pounds of smallmouth. Second day I caught 18, 19 pounds of smallmouth, and then the 3rd and 4th day it was all largemouth. I never caught another smallmouth.
I did that one year 3 times ago. I caught 20 pounds of largemouth on a topwater the first day, and the same spot was 20 pounds of smallmouth the second day. The 3rd day it was a mix of 20. Both of them I was catching 4s on smallmouth and largemouth on the same bait, and then the 4th day I never got a bite there.
Wow,
that's amazing.
Topwater.
What do you do? I mean, like, I wouldn't think to throw a treble hook bait in a situation where you know you're going to get a bite. What do you do to up your hook landing ratio?
Start it up, Lee. Or you want me to, all right. The biggest thing I do is, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's what I've always had work well for me, is I tend to throw a walking bait on a copolymer line from P-Line. It's a topwater line, but I don't like to throw a walking bait on braid unless I'm fishing around heavy grass, hydrilla, something like that they can actually get me down in. If I'm in open water or, grass that's not real thick, not real tall, I'm throwing it on that P-Line topwater line. I think that extra little bit of stretch in that copolymer helps me, because I get anxious. I get a little snatchy when I see them blow up on it. I just want to take it away from them sometimes. And I always upsize my hooks too. I put the biggest hook I can put on there. And whether that's a number 2 Ryugi treble, is what I've been using the last couple of years. Those things are sticky sharp, and they're kind of a EWG style, but they're kind of a cross between an EWG and a round bend. Like it's been a really good hook, and I've had a lot of success with that the last 4 or 5 years. And that's all I do. I throw it on a 7.2 medium heavy action rod, and I want a rod with a fairly soft tip that it's a little more forgiving when you're walking it, and that's really about all I do with it.
Lee's got a soft tip. How do you throw a topwater?
What's that?
People pin. How do you utilize your soft tip to land more fish?
It kind of depends on the situation, you know. When I'm throwing a walking bait, I'm usually throwing it on braid, just because I'm making a longer cast usually. So that's why I'm braid over like a copolymer, like Bryan said. But and if I'm throwing a devil's horse, you know, on a seawall or over a bedded fish in Florida and I'm not around grass, yeah, I'm gonna throw it on straight mono. The same thing with a popper style bait. If I'm just target casting, not making long casts, I'm going to throw it on monofilament, you know, 17 to 20 pound mono. Like Bryan said, it just gives you that stretch. And, you know, trebles depends on the species. You know, I change my trebles from when I know I'm going to catch 8-9 pounders on fork compared to when I'm going to catch smallmouth on Champlain and when I'm going to catch spotted bass on Lanier, you know, anything from, you know, 2 times EWG Gamakatsus to G finesse for spots. And, you know, mixing it up for the smallmouth as well. So, you know, like Bryan said, I throw a really soft rod. I throw a Halo 7-foot cranking rod. It's actually a cranking rod I throw, just real parabolic. So it's hook, line, and rod, you know, as far as getting the fish in the boat. And I change it on the species.
Welcome back, Zell Roland. We lost you for a few minutes there, but we've been talking about some of the gear selections. And Bryan throws most of his topwaters on a floating copolymer. And you just heard what Lee was talking about on his line choice. Talk to us about your basic walking bait line choices.
Well, I'm definitely going to throw a monofilament that'll float. Anytime you got any kind of fishing line that's going to sink slowly or something, it's really definitely going to work against you. And as always, we all would like to throw 30-pound test if we could. So, but as a rule of thumb, you know, the lighter the line you go, the more action you're going to get out of any topwater bait. So I pretty much let the fish dictate to me how much action they prefer out of a bait before I lock down one line size and I'm going to go fish a tournament with 17 or 14 or 20.
Now, I've talked to you, Zell, a lot about topwater fishing through the years, done a lot of articles and things like that. And I know that for some topwater type baits, especially maybe prop baits, there's a line size you won't go below, whether it's 14 or whatever it might be. How about for walking baits? Is there a range you like?
I prefer to throw it on 14 because I can get a lot more action out of that bait with 14-pound test, and you know, we all have different rods. As you know, I designed a rod years ago just for that. And the funny thing is, I had Rick Klein and Denny Breyer and all them guys fishing with my topwater rod. And when All-Star Rods sold, they sort of did away with, they changed the action of the blank. And but now I've got a company here in Texas. They actually got with one of the greatest rod blank engineers and were able to redesign the blank and add inches to it to make it longer. So I throw pretty much all my topwater baits on a 6/8 impulse topwater rod.
I've got that rod thanks to you, and I've also got one of your old All-Star. I got your old All-Star jerkbait rod that I still like because it's got a shorter handle. But okay, so that's the. Did you want to throw a bone to a line manufacturer, somebody you really like for the mono you use?
No, nowadays I don't have a line sponsor, but I mean, there's a lot of good, fishing lines, a lot of good fishing lines that are made from Cigar to Stren to Berkeley. They all make good lines. And I actually got to visit Berkeley one time and see how they manufactured that stuff, which was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
But as long as that line will float, that's what you want to try to use 8 out of 10 times.
Now, Lee, you mentioned the braid. I'm assuming that means you're usually fishing that walking bait pretty fast.
Yeah, most of the time, faster than a popper or a prop bait or anything like that.
Because if you don't, would you have a problem with the bait sliding over the line and maybe tangling, or you ever run into that issue? Or
no, that's that when guys start doing that, that's just because of your retrieve speed. You're not taking up enough line or overworking the bait. That's when people that aren't used to it, they're overworking the bait, not taking up enough line. You can work a spook as slow as you want to in place as long as you're taking up the right line.
Gotcha. Now, how about reel gear ratio? What do you like for that?
The highest one I got in the boat.
All right, so you're probably going 9-1 or something faster than that even.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even have anything that I got all 7-somethings to 1 in there on my topwater rods.
Pretty fast. Well, pretty fast then, but that's kind of standard speed today, I guess. Brian, how about you? What do you like for a gear ratio?
Yeah, same thing. I throw a Fitzgerald VLD 10 reel with the 8.2 to 1 gear ratio.
Are you also throwing a Fitzgerald rod?
Yeah. I actually throw my walking baits. It's my signature series frog rod. It's a 7.2 medium heavy, and to me it's the perfect action for making long casts, and it's still got a soft enough tip. You can walk that walking bait real good and walk a frog real good, but it's got enough backbone you can drag them out of grass and all that stuff too.
Zell, how about a gear ratio on a reel for you?
I'm about the same as Lee. I mean, all my reels are identical, no matter what I'm fishing with, and it's usually a 7-to-1 gear ratio.
That's a very Rick Clunn, Zell Roland thing to do, to make as much stuff that's exactly the same as you can. How long you been doing that?
Shoot, what, 35 years? I'm not going to say 40. It's, Lee and Bryan both are pretty much probably close to the same. If they don't fish with 10 different rod manufacturers and they don't use 6 or 8 different fishing reels, it's like a baseball player swinging a bat. He's got one bat that he puts his hands on. The weight may be a little different, but the action and how it feels to him is the same when he picks it up. And that helps an angler, because if I had 6 different rod and reels in my boat, every time I pick a different reel up, I'm going to have to relearn how to cast it.
I totally get that. I had a chance to fish as a co-angler in an old FLW tournament in the late 90s, and I pulled some strings and to draw Rick Clunn. And I was amazed that he had 6 or 8 rods on his deck, and they were all the same rod. This is back when he was with Daiwa. They were all exactly the same rod. They were 7-foot medium heavy rods, whether it was a jerk bait or a shallow running crankbait or a spinner bait or anything else. They were all identical with all identical reels.
Sure.
And that guy can cast. I mean, he is really precise.
He still does that. He still uses that.
Yeah.
He has a 7.7 heavy he uses for everything.
Yeah, it's amazing.
He does. He does. And he might, maybe not every single thing, but he, like 99% of his stuff is a 7.7 heavy rod.
I was blown away by how far he could throw like a little crappy crankbait.
Yeah.
He just threw it out of sight.
Have you ever seen him flip that much, Lee?
No, I've never seen him flip. No, I've seen him throw a worm, but never flip it. Short cast it. My first Elite Series event I ever fished, I top 10 on the St. Johns River, and he caught 2 10-pounders right beside me on the final day to win in 2019. So I've got a good starter Rick Clunn story.
There you go. Is that the
One
one you
of-
want on
One
the
of them
weighted
on
jig?
the ugliest spinnerbait you've ever seen in your life that I would never use, and then the other one on an old curl tail worm, just as old school as could be.
Oh my God. No kidding.
Yep.
That's wild.
I think the sport's going to miss Rick Clunn when he's not out there fishing the elites.
He's still fishing the opens, he said.
Yeah, I hope he does that.
He paid entry fees for 50 years, and then they do away with him the year. Like, are you kidding me, dude? Like 50 years he paid entry fees.
Hey, don't make me add the money up, okay?
He says, all right, I'll step aside. All right, no entry fees. Get out of here, man.
He had a Facebook post on that, didn't he? BTC?
I don't know.
I think he did. Somebody said he posted something like, I said something like, now? Really? Or something like that.
What a
Pretty
kick
funny.
in the
Yeah.
nuts or something. I saw a comment, but anyhow.
Yeah. Well, we got to get Rick on the show one of these days. We will. But all right, guys. So you guys have blown away an early theory that everybody said in the 70s, which was you had to cast past the target. Lee's
Well,
telling us
They also said you had to let the
ripples die.
oh my God, yes.
Thank you.
It was
That's-
so painful.
That'd be a Zell question. Did you ever believe that, Zell?
I couldn't wait that long.
I know Brian couldn't wait that long.
Zell, did you put that out there to make all of us do it wrong?
No. I believe there's times that when a bait hits the water, I mean, bass, I used to study them, the fish itself, when I was in junior high school. I mean, I had them for pets in 100-gallon aquariums. And it's real interesting. At times when you would drop a minnow in a tank, a bass will sit there and watch it. You know, it's like when one misses a topwater bait or balls on it. I don't think he swims 7 feet away from it. I think he's 7 inches from it, looking at it and trying to figure out if it's the real deal or not. And then it's all the angler, what he does with the bait to make that fish come back and get it again. But there's times that you want the presentation to be extremely slow. And then there's times, like Lee said, I'm going to move it as fast as you can move a popper. And that's scooting a spook pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And the speed kind of ties in, or maybe it doesn't, because we're learning so much with all these technologies. But one of the things people always talked about was valid temperatures to fish a topwater bait. And I'm sure y'all are going to change what the old school attitudes were, but people didn't talk about throwing a topwater bait much unless the water was, let's say, 55 plus. Brian, what do you think? When do you think of topwater baits becoming viable?
I mean, I've heard stories, you know, guys catching them on buzz baits and things like that pre-spawn when it's pretty cold, you know, 50, 52 degrees. I've never personally done it. I have caught them on a long A and a wake bait style topwater when the water was in the upper 40s, very low 50s.
Like a twitch bait, yeah.
Yeah, just where you're waking it on top, making it look like a lazy minnow that's kind of, I guess, going through that dial phase in the cold water, and they'll come up and slurp it off the top. But I've never caught them on a buzz bait when it's that cold.
I've heard of guys catching them on a buzz bait when there's ice, and they're telling me they're swearing up and down it's true. They're winning tournaments on this, throwing up on ice and dragging it off and buzzing it off the ice. Now, I'm not sure how much of that I believe.
You know who did that?
Who did that?
Dion Hibden.
Really? Legit?
He did it on Lake of the Ozarks. And this is back, you know, when everybody had buzz baits were sort of, everybody had one. But it's when they started changing the blade sizes. And he had, like, I called it a magnum blade. I'd never seen one because it was huge.
Like a Boogerman style blade.
Absolutely. And the water temperature in that tournament was around 48 47 to 48 degrees. There was ice in the back of the pockets, and he wore them out throwing a buzzbait. And I just kept, even though he was kicking butt, I couldn't make myself throw one looking at the ice in the back of the pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you keep that under wraps? You know, your buzzbait's chugging along the surface as it comes off the ice. How do you keep that a secret from everybody else?
You don't.
That's amazing. Well, Zell, how about it? When will you pick up? You couldn't bring yourself to pick up a buzzbait when there was ice in the back of the pockets. How warm does it have to be before you'll think about not a buzzbait necessarily, but any topwater bait?
Man, I really prefer when the water temperature's around 58. And I'm sure everybody's going to have a different number, but that's when I'll start thinking about it real hard.
Gotcha. Lee, what about you?
Just speaking where I live, Northeast Texas, anytime I feel like those males are starting to cruise, you know, that 53, 54 degrees is about where they're doing it around here, you know, especially if the water's up a little bit. You got some cloud cover, a little nasty rain in the spring. I'm picking up a black buzzbait and catching some fish on Lake Fork for sure. They get up there quicker than you think. And if they're up there, they're going to eat something that's moving because there ain't nothing else to eat up there that time of year hardly.
BTC, what are some other kind of conventional wisdom stuff that we always used to hear about, read about? Those are some of the big ones I can think of. Letting that ripple die and, you know, making a cast past your target. And so far you guys have absolutely, at least one of you has blown away all the old attitudes about topwater fishing. So it goes to show how far the thinking has gone and how divergent it is now.
Yeah. So you miss a bite on topwater, which is pretty regular, you know, happening. It was always the thinking to have a follow-up bait, something, you know, throwing a Senko back on top of it or whatever. What's your first thing? And I know I get it. Like, kind of depends on the mood of the fish. Sometimes they're coming back and sometimes they ain't. But, you know, what do you go to there? You gonna throw the topwater back at them? You gonna immediately pick up the stick bait? Lee?
I'm usually too hard-headed. I'm gonna throw that topwater back in there. But it kind of depends what you're doing. You know, if you're up on the bank around brim beds or something, just throwing a wacky worm up there, a jig's going to catch that follow-up most of the time. But, you know, if you're out there in 25 foot of water over a brush pile with forward-facing sonar, now we know those spots come up there and hit it, and they're back to the bottom in 2 seconds before you can roll your line in. So it just depends on it. A wacky worm is probably the number one thing to throw back in there. Any kind of worm is going to catch them.
Yeah.
Fewer things cooler than watching a spot rocket up out of 20, 25 feet of water to hit a spook, knock it 3 feet in the air, and be back down before the spook hits the water again almost.
Yeah.
That's cool. Even though you missed the fish, that's still pretty cool.
Probably cool catching them too.
Yeah.
What about you, Zell? You know, what was your attitude when they're short striking the topwater?
I wouldn't throw one without feathers on the tail of the bait. You know, because I made a bait, and I don't know if Brian's ever thrown one or Lee, but I made a popper. And Booyah put it in their line years ago called the Prank. And I built that bait in my garage. And all it was a popper with a crankbait lip on it. Mm-hmm. And you could chug it like a popper, but you just couldn't chug it extremely fast. But it was one of them baits to where it was like adding of a bait. You don't have to move that bait 2 inches, and the feathers are as fast as Lee's working the Spook 90 miles an hour as far as how fast they close. And as the bait sits there and Lee's not moving it, those feathers are slowly reopening on the bait. But that Prank bait that they made, it was a bait that if one boiled on it and he didn't get it, I'd bet you $1,000 on my next cast I'd get him to bite it. And what I'd do is I'd fire the bait right back, maybe a foot or so beyond where that fish boiled on it. And I'd twitch it like I would have. I'd just sweep the rod, pull it underwater, and twitch it like you would a jerk bait. And 9 times out of 10, they would hit it so good, they would swallow it. And we did some videos with Tackle Warehouse on that bait on Sam Rayburn, and it was the water was still pretty cold. It was when they had one of the Bass Classics here on Lake Conroe. And after that tournament, I told them, I said, we'll go up there and try it, but we're probably not going to get a bite on topwater bait, but we'll go up there and try it. And after they saw what happened with that bait and the film footage they got, they were truly amazed. Pretty incredible bait, but they should have made it in a bigger size to make it better, because it would have caught a lot bigger fish than what it does.
Zell, that feathered treble, as I recall, it's always on the back of your baits. Do you put it? And a lot of people like to dress up the treble on the belly, thinking that's a target, a visual target for the fish. Are you putting it on the back treble because of the action you get out of it, or for some other reason?
I put it strictly the bait because, like I said,
I'm sorry, let me back up. I don't know if everybody lost you there for a second, but I lost you there for a second when you were answering the question.
When you put that, you always want it on the back.
Okay.
If you'll remember, Ken, you and I are old enough to remember this.
Oh.
Way back when Cotton Cordell made the first Cordell hotspot.
Yeah.
You remember that bait?
Absolutely. I got them. I got a bunch of them.
He put a dot on that bait, a black dot.
Yeah.
Do you know the reasoning why that black dot was there?
No, sir. I know a lot of bait fish have a false eye.
That was his number one reasoning. Even when I sand a popper down, or I got a Zell Spook, I'll put a dot, a black dot, towards the back of the bait. So when the fish looks at it real quickly, he's not going to look at it for 10 minutes. He's going to look at it for 2 seconds. He doesn't know what really the front or the rear of that bait is. So when he strikes the bait, 90% of the time, he goes right towards the middle.
Okay, so yeah, the fish realizes that that's his best percentage thing to hit it right in the middle.
Right.
That's pretty cool. I did not know why Cotton Cordell did it. I just assumed, a lot of bait fish have a false eye.
Well, when you look at bass, when they say, like in an aquarium at Bass Pro Shops or whatever, very seldom do you ever see, when they feed those fish in a tank, very seldom will you ever see a fish swallow a shad from the tail.
Right.
They always try to get it at the head.
Yeah.
And by putting that eye on the back of the bait, regardless which way that fish is going to strike it, he doesn't really know, so he goes for the whole deal.
I'm guessing it's maybe a little bit different between a spiny rayed bait fish like a bluegill and a soft rayed bait fish like a shad. But yeah, I know it's a lot easier for them to take it down head first and not get caught in its throat and potentially choke it to death.
Lee, how do you handle that situation when trying to take something down head first so it doesn't get caught in your throat?
Just head first every time.
All right. Cheers.
Lee, what is the proper condiment for eating a shad?
Bait fuel.
Bait fuel, I like it. Says the man fishing the Halo rods, the American Baitworks products.
That's right.
Always working for his sponsors is Lee Livesay. That man's a top professional right here.
So I got one for Zell with a popper. Loop knot or no loop knot, and why?
Yes, thank you.
I don't like putting a loop knot on a popper for the simple reason I want to be able to control the action of the bait more so than, a lot of people will put a split ring on the front of a spook. And when you do that, the bait has a tendency to work against you because you're good enough you can work it. For the average guy that has never thrown his air spook, he's probably going to get more action if he puts a split ring on it. But Lee and Bryan, as professionals as what they are and the number of baits they've thrown in their lifetime, they know exactly the rhythm and cadence. And I heard Lee mention it earlier about taking the slack up. He knows how to work that bait and control the bait how he wants to control it, whether he wants it to turn 90 degrees in the water or 20 degrees in the water when he's snatching that walking bait. But never have I put a split ring. I mean, in the old days, hell, we didn't even have split rings. What are you talking about?
You tied your thread to the bent pin, and you went down to the creek and you dumped it in the water. And
we might have put super glue on it too.
if we didn't have super glue, we didn't have super glue, Zell. We had pretty good glue.
There you go.
But anyway, all right. Well, you raised a great point with the split ring thing. Bryan, Lee, do you guys like split rings on walking style baits, or are you tied directly to the eye?
I do a little bit of both. So
Aha! Take that, Zell Roland.
Right.
When I'm throwing a walking bait on that copolymer, I do tie a loop knot on it. But when I throw a walking bait on braid like Lee, when I'm open water scenario chasing schoolers and I'm making 40, 50 yard casts, I tie directly to the bait. And the reason I do that is when I'm throwing a walking bait a long ways on braid, I tend to make a real long cast. I don't want my line laying on the water. So I work it with my rod tip up in the air, and I actually walk the bait with my reel. So I'll just half turn the reel and get the bait walking where I'm not wearing my forearms out, trying to walk that bait 50 yards back to the boat.
Kind of like hitting it with a swim with a glide bait,
right. Yeah. Same thing. You're just doing it faster. Just
Gotcha. All right, Lee, you're not using a split ring or a loop knot because Zell Roland schooled you when you were a kid.
That I wasn't a kid, but I was a lot. No, that was probably the last loop knot I ever tied to any kind of topwater. Was that time?
I guess I'm done now. I can't tie a loop knot anymore.
That's why we're here, gentlemen. I don't want to be the only guy learning on the show. I like it when everybody learns, including BTC, and this is an education.
When you're fish, there's certain don't ever how bad your tail was. And back in the old days, we drew partners, right? And I drew, and Ken, you'll remember this guy. I drew Ricky Green on Sam Raver.
Mr. Consistency, 14 straight classics.
Yeah. And he literally schooled me. I was about 15 years old, and he caught 7 bass that weighed almost 30 pounds to my 2 or 3 that weighed 3 pounds. And he caught every one of them on a spook, sitting in one little area. And when I weighed in, man, you can only imagine how would you feel with 3 pounds and the guy in the front or fished with you had 28. On the way back home, probably 5 miles from the weigh in, I get pulled over by a state trooper for speeding, which I was in a hurry to get back. And that state trooper walked up to my window, and I let the window down, and he looked at me and he goes, "Oh my God, you fished with Ricky Green today." I said, "Man, just go ahead and write me the ticket and let me go because I can't stand it." And he goes, I just don't have the heart to give you a ticket for speeding.
Well, I've been whooped by Zell Roland. I've been whooped by Lee Livesay. I haven't been whooped by Bryan Thrift because I haven't had the privilege to be in his boat, but I've been beaten up by a lot of great anglers.
You know, I think more so, and I'm not sure about today's anglers, but years ago, I mean, when you think about it, I've had the privilege to fish with all of the legends in the sport. I mean, I grew up a little bit when I was 15 years old with Rick Clunn, and I fished with Bill Dance and Jimmy Houston and Denny Breyer and Dave Glebe, and from these guys. And I spent lots of time and many hours with them, traveling, staying at their house, and learning the tricks of the trade of what they do. And, you know, and nowadays, the younger all that twice as fast. And then they go out on the water and they apply that. And they teach themselves with the knowledge. And they're deadly. I mean, it's like handing one a shotgun, and you're going to stand in front of it. So in today's world, these guys are pretty knowledgeable, and they're not idiots when it comes to knowing how to catch one.
Well, but they're also standing on the shoulders of giants like Zell Rowland and Bill Dance and Rick Clunn and Roland Martin and Dave Glebe and Denny Brower. They learned a lot from you through television and stuff like that. And yeah, it is easier, I think, to pick up that stuff today because of the internet. But that pro on pro era had to be pretty cool because you're getting their best game. You're watching Ricky Green's best game, Rick Clunn's best game, because they're fishing for their livelihood. Lee and Bryan, do you guys feel like maybe you missed something by not participating in that era?
I mean, I want to say yeah, but I don't think so. I feel like when I started my career, you know, the internet was pretty prevalent. You know, it was 2007, so the internet had been around a while. There was a ton of information out there, and I think we all started out probably fishing local team tournaments. You know, I fished with some great anglers here in North Carolina, South Carolina, before I ever started fishing professional. And I actually got a year or two as a co-angler under my belt when I first started in 05 and 06. And I'll never forget the very first FLW tournament I fished in 2006 as a co-angler. My first day, I drew, you know, one of the guys that I'd always looked up to ever since I wanted to do the whole bass fishing gig. And I ended up getting paired up with Guido Hibden. So,
oh, man.
Yeah, I got to spend a day in the boat with him down at Lake Okeechobee, and we had a ball. So it is fun getting to see. I would recommend everybody that's wanting to get into bass fishing to, you know, do a year of the co-angler or do an observer, an official, either with MLF or with bass, and, you know, just see how guys make those thought processes on the water, how they make decisions and things like that. You can really learn a lot from that.
Now, Lee, you're still a very young man. You've heard about the days of the pro on pro stuff and the chance that Zell had to fish with all these legends. You can set up a trip with a lot of these people that you've come to know through the years, but do you feel like you missed anything by not fishing in that era?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wish I could have, you know, just like Bryan knew, you know, learned a lot from Thrift.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of the same, and everybody learns different. You know, nobody in my family bass fished at all. I mean, we catfished off the bank and, you know, on docks and stuff in Oklahoma, but I always just wanted to bass fish for whatever reason. My uncle Ed, and I'm in my late 30s, so I'm not that young, because when I was young, my uncle would record the fishing shows on Saturday morning on a VHS tape and then mail it to my parents, and I would watch the VHS tapes over and over and over and over and over and over and over. I'm sure we still have them somewhere, and that's kind of where I got the bass fishing bug. You know, I didn't bass fish besides ponds until I moved to East Texas from Oklahoma, and, you know, and we just had a little V-bottom aluminum boat with a 9.9 Evinrude that didn't even run. We just ran the trolling motor, one battery till it died, and then that battery back to the boat ramp. And that's how I learned to fish.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody learns different, you know, and I was just always addicted to it. When I got out of college, I went back and started guiding. And obviously that's all I did was fish and hunt. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't just grow up in a bass fishing family or have Bryan Thrift or Zell Rowland as a mentor. But when I moved back to Texas, you know, I was at Fort 365 days a year around, you know, Mark Pack, Lance Vick, you know, Brooks Rogers, who fished with Zell for a while, you know, those guys that, you know, that late 90s, early 2000s, late Fort guide crew was legendary. You know, they had a lot of innovation, a lot of historical, you know, FLW and BASS guys in and out, from Top to James to Matt, Pack and everybody. So that's kind of where I learned from, was just, and not even fishing with them, you know, just being around them and, you know, just rubbing off on them. So everybody learns a little bit different. You don't have to be Kevin Van Dam's son or fish like Zell did with that. Obviously, hell yeah, I wish I could have, but I didn't, you know. And these kids these days, you know, they're learning off of YouTube and Bassmaster and MLF Live. You know, that's what you do.
Yeah, it's a special era now where there's a camera in every boat and guys have a chance to learn from the very best. It's very cool. Zell, I want to come back to you because we talked about walking style baits, and you're the king of the popper and the popper generally. And you not only are the king of that bait style, but you help redefine that bait style and redesign that bait style into something more than just a bait that pops or chugs like a hula popper back in the day. But how much of your topwater fishing is done with a walking style bait versus a popper or something else?
Oh, you know, everybody's got their favorite style of what they would like to do.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to throw a popper before I throw a spook.
Okay.
And if I go to a body of water, I mean, and we're like where Lee guides and he fishes all the time at Fork, a lot of big fish in Fork. So I'm going to throw a larger bait. I mean, I would feel more comfortable throwing a Magnum popper or a super spook than I would a smaller popper or a smaller spook. So it really depends on the body of water that I'm going to go and fish. But I'm going to say probably 8 out of 10 times I'm always throwing a popper to start off with, because that is a control how fast I fish it, how slow I fish it. And I know if a fish shows himself to me, I really deeply feel probably 8 out of 10 times I can get that fish to bite the bait.
Talking about the popper, you know, and talking about the walking style bait, walking style baits are big, and I realize that, or at least bigger than most topwaters. And I realize that's partly because you got to have that kind of mass and that kind of glide to them to make them do the things that we want a walking bait to do, which is walk the dog and all that stuff. Poppers, you don't have to have that same kind of keeling action and stuff. And I don't think of pencil poppers as traditional poppers really, but that's the only popper I can think of that's as big as your traditional walking baits. Am I missing some traditional poppers out there that are as big as a walking bait, and why aren't poppers bigger, Zell?
That's a good question. I actually found, and I don't, it's probably an archive bait, but Predco made a popper, and it was in the Rebel popper family. That thing was like riper bait that something.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. I don't know why, because
one for me.
The older I got in the fishing world, it's like Bryan. If you were to ask Bryan or Lee, I mean, I already know what spook Lee would like to throw on fork because he's
Spook
going
Lee.
9 times out of 10 he's going to throw a super spook because it's got 3 hooks on it and it's big. And when it comes to poppers, I really don't know why anybody's never really built one bigger. Bryan might prefer throwing the old P70 style popper versus the P60, which was smaller. And that's the one I grew up throwing, was the smaller one. But the bigger one, I'll tell you who I think of. Golly, fished for years. My mind went blank. That's what happens when you get older.
Tell me about
Who is
where was he from?
He's from Palatka, Florida.
Manuel Spencer.
No, Big Show. Terry
Terry
Scroggins.
Scroggins. Yeah.
Terry came to my house one day, and this is after they had quit making the P70s. But I had a box of the P70 bodies. I had cut the heads off with a hacksaw, and I put Bondo in the back of it, and I was using them for cabinet knobs in my garage. And Scroggins seen that, and he says, "Man, are you kidding me?" I said, "What?" He says, "You've done taken a bait they don't make. That's all I throw." I said, "You throw them P70s?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He said, "That's the only way to fly." And I said, "Man, I got a whole bunch more of them for you." But a lot of the guys prefer throwing that big popper, to where you can call it old school. I like that P60, but it's such a smaller bait and a low profile bait. But if I go to fork, I know the kind of fish that swims in there. And I know if I don't catch these larger fish that Lee's going to catch, I'd never stand a chance to compete against him if I was fishing there. And so a lot of it depends on the body of water we're going to. And like Bryan said earlier, there's so much social media you can learn from on the internet, which back in those days we didn't have that. You're going to compile quite a bit of information of how big of fish streams they catch, a 5-fish limit on this lake or that lake. And that you can cut your bait selection down where I don't have to carry a whole semi truck full of them anymore when I go somewhere.
I want to follow up on some of the feather trebles you were talking about earlier, Zell. Is it always white? Do you ever go red or black?
I got every color you want. When I first started, when Rebel actually put the feathers on there, and a lot of guys didn't pay too much attention to it. And when I started playing with the bait and adding feathers to a bait, there's different lengths that you can add to get more action, or shorten it to get like cutting a jig skirt. The shorter you cut that jig skirt, the more that jig breathes. The longer you leave that jig skirt, the slower the process is as you move that jig through the water. And it's just the opposite with feathers. But when it comes to colors on feathers, I think I've never seen that much proof on how much colors, when the water's muddy, the darker, the more silhouette a fish would probably. But I mean, I always had red in, or chartreuse, or even black. But I can tell you how many's in a pound. I ordered a box of them, and I ordered I didn't know how many pounds of feathers was. It's more of them that you can put in some pillows, I promise you.
I got a question along the same lines. Caleb S. on the message board wants to know about red treble hooks. Do you ever put a red treble hook on the bait?
I don't.
No, Lee.
I have before on the poppers and devil horse, prop style baits before. I'm sure Zell's practiced with that more than I have.
No, I'm about the same. I mean, it's all three of us are going to change. I think it was either Lee or Bryan say it earlier. If we walk in a store and buy, depending on the bait company, but a lot of times when we go in a store and we buy a lot of baits, we buy a lot more baits than what people may think we buy. I mean, as big a name as Lee has and Bryan has, yeah, he could probably pick up his phone and call a competitor that's not a sponsor, and they would gladly send him some baits. But instead of him doing that, both of them want to know if these baits are any better than what they got. So that's part of our homework. We'll go into Academy and Bass Pro, and we'll buy 3 or 4 of these because we want to know, is this jerk bait better than the 4 I got? And they all have different actions. But we're going to change the hooks on a lot of the baits that we buy. Even some of the manufacturers that we work for. If they know they got to spend 5 cents more to put a better hook on that bait, more than likely they're not going to spend that extra 5 cents because they're going to multiply that 5 cents times 50,000. And that's money they could put in their pocket if they don't spend the money. But there are companies that have taken that step and said, man, we're going to spend the extra 10 or 15 cents for the better hook. We're going to put it on our bait, and our bait will just be priced higher. And they do that.
It's only $2,500.
That's right.
How about treble hooks with the blade on them? Bladed trebles. Ever mess with that with Topwater? Nah? Yeah. Nah.
I've never even tried one.
Neither.
I haven't put one on a Topwater bait. I mean, I've put them on other baits, but I haven't added them to a Topwater bait.
Yeah. How about color? And we had a show with Fritz on a few months back, and we actually it was about color, and Fritzy said nothing matters but the color of the belly on a topwater bait.
No, well, on a crankbait, he said.
Did he?
Yes, he said on a crankbait the only color that matters is on the belly, because it's usually digging, so that means the lip is actually behind the body of the bait, and most of what they see from behind, at least, is that belly color.
Now you want some old school?
Always.
I don't think there's, but now you have to decide this for yourself.
No, I got Zell Rowland to tell me.
There ain't.
I don't have to decide squat.
I don't think there's but 3 colors a fish can see, period.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Now those colors are going to change because of the angler or the watercolor, or if the sun's out, or if it's cloudy. But the only 3 colors a fish really pays any attention to is a color that we call dark, another one we call light, and they all pay attention to red. You know why that is?
Nope.
There's not a fish that swims in the water anywhere in the world. And you ought to know this, Ken, because I've been to your house and seen the books you got. There's not a fish in the world that swims in water that doesn't have a dark back, a light belly, and they all got red gills. But the color dark could range from anywhere from black or dark gray. But you've never seen a fish swimming in the water with a black belly and a white back.
Right.
Unless he's upside down.
The old,
Yeah, during the live well.
I don't mean to be having a conversation just between me and Zell because we're old, but Zell, you remember the Crankbait Corporation back in the 80s. It was owned and all the baits were designed by a guy named Tom Seward, who was a whiz at design. And he actually designed or colored some baits with a light dorsal side and a dark belly side, saying, oh, this is going to stand out in nature. And these fish, this thing is going to get hammered. Of course, that didn't run very long.
You know what? That's because it didn't catch him too good.
Yeah. Could have been, but yeah.
Because Lee and Bryan will tell you right now, if I'm fishing a tournament and when they whip on me real good, when that tournament's over, what they were throwing and how everybody's going to know. Somebody's going to know. And you can bet before the next tournament, I probably got one or two of what he had before.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, Mr. Thrift, does color on a topwater bait matter? And if so, is it just the belly side?
No, I don't think it's just the belly side. I keep it pretty simple when it comes to a walking bait. I want one that's either white and kind of opaque.
Did you say white?
Yeah.
White. All right.
He's speaking English. What are you speaking, BTC?
Nothing.
And then
I'm learning.
I want a translucent bait. I don't care what flavor of translucency. And then I want a chrome bait. That's the only three walking colors I need.
I bet you Brian's got one of them old Zell Spooks that's got that white opaque color.
I do.
Yeah, I
I
bet
do.
you do. Because old Biffle, he asked me about a color like that one time because I was sponsored by him, and I'd never seen one.
Yeah.
And when he showed it to me, I said, "Man, they should have kept building that," but they didn't. And it catches them.
Can you describe it a little more?
I can go get some samples. We got a minute. All right.
Yeah,
let
man.
Let me go play in the office or in the shop.
Go ahead.
Mr. Livesay, I am horrified that Bryan the Carpenter does not realize this is a show with 4 Southerners and 1 Yankee.
Uh,
I'll
And he
fight
needs
every
to-
one of you.
He needs to keep that in mind. All right, Lee, what do you think about color and topwater baits? Is it important?
I mean, no, I mean, I'm just like those two. I mean, I throw bone and white most of the time just because the belly of everything, like Zell said, is white. And then chrome around herring lakes just because that's what everybody tells you to do. And I do have a few black spook style baits and poppers, all black for smallmouth. Smallmouth really love a black spook up on Champlain and a little popper too. And they would probably eat anything, but I got them.
Okay, here's my question on color. I'm sorry, Bryan, go ahead and show us the baits you
All
found
right,
for us
so
here.
The three main deals I have. So this is the Demiki. Let me find the camera. This is the Demiki Rambler. But you can see how it's pretty opaque. You can't really see all the way through it. So it's just a solid shad pattern, got a white belly, and just a light colored back. That's one of the colors I'm going to throw. And then I'm going to have a clear bait. So I've got a clear Demiki Rambler. I actually added a few little scales to it. I just get some. I spend a lot of time at Walmart looking at the fingernail polish. So this is a clear fingernail polish.
There have been some calls to the authorities about that, Bryan.
Yeah, so it's a clear fingernail polish that's got a silver flake on it. So when you put it in, when you paint the bait, it doesn't add color to the bait. It just puts a metal flake on it. So just to give it a little bit of flash.
What brand?
I have no idea.
Nail
I can go
polish
get
is
that
your
if you want me to. I'll go get it. And then the other was just a solid chrome. And I like the chrome, like Lee said, the herring fish. But another time of the year that I always throw a chrome bait is in the fall. So when fish specifically get keyed in on shad in the late fall, I'm always going to be throwing a chrome walking bait. It seems like it gets more bites.
That's a good looking bait. That's a very good looking bait. Yeah, it's always kind of made me wonder about stuff.
So did you have that color that Zell was talking about?
No, I didn't have it with me.
That's in his secret box. Man.
I could probably dig it out. Like my walking bait box is one of those deep boxes, and I take, as you can see, all the hooks are off these baits. So when I store my baits, I take the hooks off so I can fit more in the box. And then when I use them, I just slap hooks on them. You can see this one's got hook rash on it, and after I fish with it, I'll take the hooks off and throw the bait back in the box.
Oh my God. Oh, that sounds terrible. Oh my God. I could never. Good for you, Bryan.
Hey, I had a guy do that one time, flipping a jig. And
he took the hook off?
Well, he practiced with me. And he says, why haven't you hooked a fish? I said, because I cut the hook off in practice. And I said, when the fish, I'm not going to stick him. And I draw this same guy 2 days later as my co-angler. And he can't set the hook on a fish this. And he was sitting there using the same jig. He cut the hook off with me in practice.
Perfect.
I'm guessing he never went on to win a classic.
No. Well, the one thing you could notice on Bryan's walking baits is where that line tie was on the bait. It's on the very nose of that bait, and that makes any walking bait way easier for you to control and work it and get it to walk. If the line tie is set further back on the bait, then usually they're not going to catch nowhere near as many fish.
Going back to color for just a second, I've always wondered about that because as bass fishermen, we're really focused on a certain group of colors for soft plastics, a certain group of colors for jigs, topwater baits, crankbaits, and so forth. About 20 years ago, I convinced a friend of mine who had a lure company at the time to make green pumpkin skirts for his spinner baits, and they did pretty good. And now you can see that in the marketplace. Why hasn't a color like green pumpkin, which dominates the world of soft plastics, become an option in the topwater world? I mean, why wouldn't it also be attractive to the fish there?
I think it has somewhat, and I'm counting frogs too as topwaters. But even some of Zell's old pop R's, it was that it had a white belly. Don't get me wrong, but the side was brown with the black, stripes and stuff. It was more of a brown pop R. That's like the only color I ever threw. So I mean, I'm with you, but I mean, you see guys throwing just straight green pumpkin frogs a lot.
Oh yeah. I think as bass fishermen, we can tend to be kind of narrow-minded or fixed in our ideas. And that's why it's cool to see the next generations come in and kind of reinvent stuff. But Bryan says that's incorrect, and he's probably right.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Bass fishermen aren't narrow-minded.
No.
Not at all.
No. Okay.
It's like when you watch Bryan fish, I don't know. I've watched him fish for years, and it amazes me how good he is with a spinning rod versus a bait caster. And if I got to pick up a spinning rod, guess what? I ain't catching one. Old Denny Breyer's been waiting for his 4 by 4 foot size poster of me holding a fairy wand in my hand, but it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, Bryan's a different animal. One of my buddies that lives on Lake Lanier drew you in a It had to have been FLW tour when y'all had Coanglers. Had to have been.
Yeah.
One of those last ones, obviously, on Lanier. And this dude is awesome. He kind of fits Indiana Thrift's family tree. Just to say it nicely, his name was Jimmy Powell. You might remember. He probably looked homeless when he walked in your boat. And he probably didn't even fish much. He's actually a pretty good fisherman, to be honest, over there. But he said you were skipping some kind of either a wacky worm or something like that under some marina dock or a dock.
Yeah.
He said he watched Bryan miss the cast like 10, 15, whatever it was, a dozen times, and would most people would just I'll let it sink down. Bryan missed the cast, reeled it straight in, missed the cast like 15 times in a row until he hit the exact cast, and it went down there and he caught one every cast when it got in there, or whatever it was. But he was just mind blown that Thrift had thrown 20 times and missed, made a bad cast, but he was trying to hit a spot that big until he got his worm in there and then caught the fish. So.
Yeah, I'm not very handy with a spinning rod when it comes to skipping something.
Yeah, I don't know about that. He was saying it in a good way, like he would have never done that.
No, it's like with a jig, I might get it in there, but a spinning rod, I'm gonna hit the dock 2 or 3 times. But we'll get it in there.
That's wild. It's so much easier on a spinning rod. You're not going to backlash. That's crazy.
Oh, you just make that cast and have like 4 loops of line come off the spool at one time.
Well, they got line twist, but yeah.
A little bit. Not so much now that guys use braid for the main line, but
yeah, that did kind of eliminate a lot of that.
Yeah, that helps a bunch.
So when you're bombing a spook on braid, you're not throwing a short leader on it?
Lee?
Bryan?
Oh, no.
Lee?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Bryan does that too for schoolers.
Neither one is. Okay. Okay.
Okay, guys, what's a common mistake that a lot of anglers make when they're fishing topwater baits? What do you see guys not doing that they should be doing, or doing that they shouldn't be doing?
Overworking the bait.
Aha. Tell us more. Just fishing it too fast?
No, that's when they get the line hooked around the first treble hook and stuff like that. They're just overworking that bait or not taking up enough line and stuff like that. Trying to walk the dog. I'm talking about a walking, topwater.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when a guy gets the line hooked around that belly treble or one of the belly trebles, is that most often because he's not great at casting that bait and he's not allowing that bait to lay out on the back cast before he comes forward? Is that a lot of the problem, or is that just going to happen to everybody no matter what you do?
I mean, you're going to have it happen every now and then, no matter what. But most of the time, it's people, jerking the bait too hard, and that, whatever line they're using is hooking around that front treble hook most of the time is the problem.
Gotcha. So it's not a problem necessarily in the air, because I usually think I create problems for myself when the bait's in the air, because maybe the bait's tumbling instead of kind of laying out nice.
You got the wrong rod, kid.
Well, see, I don't have the full arsenal of the Zell Roland All-Star and Impulse lineup.
You shouldn't have it. I guess we've always talked about going fishing. I guess we're going to have to go.
I'm the king of the pity trip.
I do know this much about you.
Yes, sir.
I don't know. But Ken is the first guy he goes out on December the 30th.
Or 31st.
If it's a leap year.
Never mind. We'll have to tell. Zell's locked up for me, but yeah, we'll have to tell Zell that December has 31 days.
Be the first guy.
Yeah, I haven't done that in a while, but yeah, I don't know if y'all could hear everything Zell was saying, but he locked up for me. But I used to like to go out right before midnight on December 31st because I live in Central Florida. It's warm, and I drag my poor wife out with me, and I try to catch a fish spot on, midnight, just so I could say, okay, I caught the first bass in America for this year.
That's pretty cool.
And then I'd say,
If I know Ken, he's probably got.
I have a lot of stupid habits, like wearing a smoking jacket and an ascot on our podcast. But
Mine are worse.
Well, I don't know about that. All right, Bryan, what about you? What about some mistakes you see guys make when they're topwater fishing?
I'd say the number one mistake I see is people lay the topwater down too early. That topwater bite will last all day a lot of times, more often than not, especially in the heat of the summer when most people would think, I just want to throw a walking bait or a popper or a buzz bait the first 30 minutes after daylight, and once the sun comes up, they lay it down. But the dog days of summer are some of the best times to put that topwater bait in your hand all day long. I mean, if you're fishing for schoolers on points, or you start running shade pockets on a bank, like that's a big thing I see happen a lot in that heat of the summer. If you're fishing a riprap bank and there's one bush on it that's up on the bank and it's casting a little pocket of shade over the water, there'll be bluegill sitting there, bass sitting there in that little piece of shade. And you can run that bite all day long, even if the water temp's in the mid to upper 80s.
Oh, brilliant.
All right, so here's my problem with it. Like, I feel like, obviously, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but like, if I was just to throw topwater and then leave an area without throwing something, I don't know. I feel like I'm like walking over fish, like leaving. You guys, you feel confident you can go through an area throwing just topwater and just keep on stepping and not throw something that gets underwater while you're there too.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially when you're looking for that bigger bite, that kicker bite in the summer. I mean, most lakes, especially lakes that don't have herring and things like that, you've got a population of fish that stay deep, that feed on shad, whatnot, and then you've got a whole nother population of bass that are solely bluegill feeders. They stay up shallow, and I truly believe that fish I think they kind of train themselves. I know that the females and the males don't hang around after the eggs hatch, but I think there's some type of genetic response there, because you see lakes that have grass, and once, if they kill the grass on those bodies of water, those fish are used to staying shallow in that grass and eating bluegill, but once they kill the grass, those fish still stay up there. They don't move out offshore. Even 4 or 5 years later, there'll still be a population of fish that stays up shallow that's just strictly feeding on bluegill.
So a body of water that doesn't have bluebacks, it doesn't have shad, that's just like a primarily bluegill body of water. What's your topwater baits?
Any of them. I think you can do it with all of them. Like I said earlier, when I got a topwater tied on, I'm gonna have a walking bait. I'm gonna probably have a frog. I'm gonna have a popper. I'm gonna have a buzz bait. I'm gonna have 5 or 6 different topwaters tied on, just for different scenarios, until I can figure out what they want. Do fish want a fast retrieve? Do they want a slow retrieve? Do they want something steady? And different things like that, and different noise levels. I mean, your noise level between a plopper and a buzz bait to a walking bait that doesn't have any rattles, or a popper that doesn't have any rattles. It's a lot of totally different noises. And, I'll still break out, the old, God, I can't even think of the name of it now, tiny torpedo. Like, I'll have it tied on occasionally, because when bass start feeding in the fall, I ain't never thrown nothing like that. But in the fall time of year, when you start seeing those bass schooling on those little tiny shad, they're like 1.5 inches long. Man, you can't beat a clear tiny torpedo. That just ripping it with that single prop, it sounds just like those little shad fleeing on the surface.
Yeah. Do any of you guys, Caleb Summerall's well known for putting scent on topwater. Do any of you guys do that? Lee?
I don't think I have.
No.
I have not.
Just a very strong believer in that. Ken?
We talked a little bit about water temperature earlier, and everybody there seemed to be a pretty good consensus that for the most part, water's got to get in the 50s before you guys are thinking seriously about topwater. Is there a high-end limit to topwater fishing? Bryan, you just mentioned running shade pockets when the water temperature's in the upper 80s. Is there a time when it gets too hot for you to go topwater?
Not for me personally.
Lee, what do you think?
No, I mean, that's been proven, all the old Forest Wood Cups used to be in the dog days, whatever. Bryan knows, is that when they were?
It's always like the first, second week of August. Like we were in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and it'd be like 110 every day.
All those August tournaments, they got close to getting one on a topwater, or there was multiple guys in the top 10 throwing them every single year. So, I mean, there's always going to be fish get pushed shallower the hotter it gets, because that messes that thermocline up, and that water starts getting really messed up oxygen wise late in the summer. So I think the hotter it is, the better they're going to eat it sometimes.
What about you, Zell? Do you ever say, okay, I got to go to heavy, thick cover and flip a jig or punch a creature bait or something? Do you ever put down topwater because it's too hot?
Well, the only time I'll put it down is when I feel like if a fish is relating more to the cover that fish in, then I'll lay it down. There, it's going to depend on. I mean, I'm like Bryan and Lee. I mean, we used to go out to Lake Mead in Las Vegas, Nevada, and fish out there once every year. It'd be 120 degrees, and you'd throw a popper all day long and catch them. So it's more or less to me I can get away with what the fish want.
Indiana Thrift, we're talking about Spook so much, but we never really nailed down what the favorite walking style bait is of these three guys who are so good with them. Lee, what is your go-to walking bait?
I throw a 6 cents Dogma most of the time, but everybody saw me win that second Elite on Fork with saltwater Spook. I've got 20 of them on a rack right there. That's just what I grew up throwing. So I keep my stuff pretty simple.
How big's a saltwater Spook? 6 inch?
I don't know, probably 5 inches.
Yeah.
All right.
Bryan, what's your go-to?
My go-to is I've got a whole box of walking baits. I'd say my go-to is that Demiki Rambler I showed earlier. If I'm throwing that size of bait, and that's the only size they make it in, it's a 105 size, I believe. But there's a lot of smaller ones. Like I'll throw different ones as far as the pencil popper style baits, like the little evergreens and things like that, and even I think the company, is it Head, and it makes the actual Super Spook. They came out with a little boyo Spook. It's a little bitty walking bait that's like 2 inches long.
Do you have to throw that on a spinning rod? Do you have to throw that on spinning gear?
No, I'll throw it on a 6.6 bait caster.
I wonder if the bait finesse stuff would be good for that, the BFS rods and reels.
It's still a fairly heavy bait. Like you can still throw it on conventional size tackle very easily and throw it on.
Very cool. Well, Zell, you've got a long history, obviously, with the Pradco companies and Head. Is the Spook your go-to walking style bait, or do you have some others in the mix?
No, Spook is, when we found out that by moving that line tie further forward made it a better bait, that's when they the Super Spook, which is a saltwater style, and then they over the years they've moved that line tie to the nose, but it's I don't have 3 hooks on, even like the one Bryan was just talking about. Hadn't made a thing. It's little bitty and got weight to it where you can throw it, but there's not a walking bait I don't add a 3rd hook to that bait. I mean, it's almost like a jerk bait when I do it that way. If the fish breathes on it, he gets a hook.
Mm-hmm.
You saying you add a hook to the middle of the bait?
Yeah, I don't have a Zell Spook that doesn't have 3. I mean,
Interesting.
Yeah, Zell's glitching on my end. I don't know if everybody's having a hard time hearing him there.
We are, yeah.
from the saltwater side. Okay, we back. Yeah, there we go.
Gotcha now.
Yeah, I'll add a hook to every walking bait I got.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
I cut the front hook off and add a screw in, move the front hook further forward, and then add the middle hook in between the front and the back hook.
Well, you can only do that though on a wooden bait, right?
No, it's plastic.
How do you keep them from pulling the hook out?
If you take that hook, it with like a small torch or something, red, and as soon as it turns red, you put a dot. You put a dot on the bottom, like this spook's got 3 hooks on it. When that hook hanger turns red, I'll ease it into the plastic, and it threads it as it goes in. And
Geez, Zell Roland, you're just a lure surgeon, man. I knew you were.
I don't have a topwater bait I probably don't touch.
Well, I know that. I mean, I know how delicate your pop-bar modifications were back in the day, where you'd sand them until they were almost too thin that a bass could crush them.
Yeah,
almost.
There's still a lot of guys that's got a lot of the old P60s. When you sanded that bait down, it hard as concrete because it was made out of what they call a butyr plastic, and the bone color was more real bone color, like Lee and Bryan's mentioned earlier. When they changed it to an ABS type plastic, the plastic sort of has more of a whitish bone color to it, and it's not the same. Gotcha. It's a more of a brighter white bottom to it when you sand. I've got topwater baits that the world hadn't seen yet. I just ain't ever.
I love it.
I got some they would like to have. I promise.
All right, manufacturers out there looking for the next go-to bait that's going to be a wild success. You holler at me, I'll get you Zell Roland's contact info. Bryan Thrift, please tell me, for the love of God, you're not adding treble hooks to hard plastic baits. That's got to be super difficult.
And then taking them off when you store them.
I've never done that. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he takes his off.
Yeah, and you take them all off again.
Yeah, I take them off to store them.
And your crankbaits too, and jerk baits.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
What?
Dude, I can't stand grabbing a bait and like 20 of them coming out of the box with it.
I hear you. But
the thing about a walking bait that a lot of people don't know is over the years they changed how they built them. They used a Zell Spook or a walking bait used to be 2 pieces. You had and now they're still pieces. There's a right and a left. Dead hook hang. There's a ridge on the inside of this bait that stands up about 1/8 of an inch, and that's what actually holds these hooks in that bait is only that little plastic ridge, but it's hard and thick. So when I put that screw in it, it melts right into the plastic and goes right up in there and threads in. So I learned a lot of that stuff from Fritz and his freaking crankbaits he used because his stuff was wild.
I know David used to have a drill press that he would work out and drill a little hole and put a little lead in and stuff like that. But he was working with those Poe's wooden baits, cedar baits back at the time. I've never heard of him doing this with hard plastic.
But David would sit there if David gave you one of them old Poe's crankbaits, if he found it deep in his heart to give you one, That's the one you don't want to throw because it ain't gonna catch one.
I may have to beg for one of those from Mr. Fritz. That's pretty cool. All right, Lee Livesay, we've learned that Bryan Thrift takes all the trebles off his baits before he stores them. We've learned that Zell Roland is adding treble hooks to hard plastic baits. So they're both stark raving mad, as far as I can tell. What's the craziest thing you do with your gear?
Nothing like that, man. I'm pretty simple. I'm sitting here trying to find something cool. I ain't got it. Trust me. That's why I keep looking to the right. I'm like, well, I don't do shit like that at all.
that speaks well of your mental health, sir. If nothing else, because I'm thinking about how many hours Bryan spends putting trebles back on his baits before the season starts, and I don't
do it before the season. I do it like the night before I'm going to throw it in the tournament.
Oh wow, that seems
so you have to do it on the water too.
Yeah, if I feel like I need a color change.
Okay.
So your whole box baits with no hooks on it in the tournament, and then whatever you tied on your rod has hooks.
Yep.
I don't think I could do that.
So do you take them off?
Like my biggest fear in fishing is being on the water, not having something I need. So like every box I've got, you can't put one more bait in it. So like my walking bait box, it will not hold one more walking bait at all. Like the lid will not close. And if I got hooks on all of them, I can't put as many in there.
So how many do you use a year? Like one?
Most of the time, yeah. Most of the time, it's one. At best, 3. But I still carry like 50 of them in the boat with me.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Now, follow-up question, Mr. Thrift. Have you passed this tackle mania on to Bryan New?
I'm afraid I did. He actually may be worse than I am.
He's way worse.
Wow.
Yeah, I think he learned that from me, but I think he's took it to another level. He stepped it up.
I would tell y'all for what he spent on tackle 2 years ago.
Oh, I hate to imagine it,
but Brittany might kill him. He told me the number that he spent on tackle, and it blew my mind. Like I don't think I've spent that much in my lifetime on tackle.
She's not. She'll never know.
No.
And he spent it in a year. It was a lot. Like you would never believe me, and I don't believe it.
She'll never know.
I guarantee you, it was a lot.
Was it as much as that first Bassmaster check win?
No, but it was half of it almost.
Yeah.
Wow.
He takes the blades off his spinner baits. What's he do?
No, he takes the beads off the arm of the spinnerbait and the clevis, because you don't need those when you're just storing them.
Clevis.
I love talking with the best anglers in the world about how they handle their tackle, because I always learn something, and B, I always realize I'm not that meticulous.
No.
Some of them are bad. I've heard thrift is bad. I've heard it.
Yeah, it's bad. Hey, I'll tell you, I've got so much tackle in the boat. So with MLF, we don't have to use our live wells. I plug my live wells off, and I've got 2 Rottermate containers that fit in my live wells. And
That's awesome.
Wow. Well, Lee, when Bryan takes all them hooks off, the boat's a little lighter too.
well, I do that so I can put more baits in there.
Yeah, Bryan's got 50 spooks, but 3 treble hooks.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. You just take the hooks off, or do you cut them off and throw them away?
I take them off, and I'll use them like frac center fishing around the house or something like that. Like
donate them to charity.
I've seen many people take a hook. I guess I could donate some to charity if they want.
He puts them in a shadow box. These are my hooks from 2019. I'll tell you one thing that I learned in all my years of following the tournament trail and working for the different organizations is that the most meticulously rigged boat on the circuits is owned by Zell Roland. He rigs these boats himself. There is not an inch of slack in any of that wiring, and you would proudly eat your lunch out of his battery well. It is so crazy clean.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Some of the
yeah.
guys who you think would be kind of messy are not, and the guys who you think are crazy clean and organized are not. Like Elton Jones is not terribly organized. And I remember being on the water with him, and he's got electrical tape holding guides on some rods. And then you got Zell Rowland, where you'd eat out of his battery box. You really would. Zell, how long you been rigging your own boat?
Oh man, for probably 25 years. I mean, my brother just bought him a bay boat. He bought a used bay boat for bay fishing in the bay down here, and he said, "Man, would you rig this thing?" I said, "I really don't want to touch it," but yeah, it would amaze guys when you. A lot of it is I want to know where everything's at in that boat, and if I've got a bilge that goes out, I can replace it myself. I don't have to take it to a service guy. I can do it right now. So, and then I cut a lot of the loose wiring out of there just because it doesn't need to be there. But a lot of the boat manufacturers, they'll put a 21-foot boat harness in a 20-foot boat just to save money, so they don't have to carry the two different inventories. But I keep it pretty slick.
All right, guys, going back to the topwater thing and the spook thing, you're all fishing with different rods. It sounds like Bryan Thrift's throwing the heaviest rod out there because it's also a rod he'd throw a frog with. How do you set the hook when you get a strike? And when do you set the hook when you get a strike on a walking style bait? Lee?
Well, I'm just going to reel into them as fast as I can because I'm throwing straight braid. You don't have to yank on them. So that's going to be a little bit different than Thrift just because he's throwing a copolymer, and a little bit heavier rod. So me, I'm just, I'm pulling on them and setting the hook. Don't get me wrong, but I'm more just reeling into them and letting that rod load up. But there's a difference in setting the hook on a Gamakatsu 2 times heavy EWG compared to a G finesse on a spotted bass too. You know what I mean? You got to know when you're setting a hook on an 8-pound largemouth and a 2.5-pound spot too.
So you're holding the rod at basically a 90-degree angle from the fish and reeling into them fast?
Yeah, I'm setting the hook too, but not like a frog. You know what
Sweeping
I mean?
it more.
You can set the hook with a reel that's high speed, really, really good, sweeping the rod.
Gotcha. How about you, Brian? A little bit heavier rod than these other guys.
Yeah, a heavier rod with that copolymer, and that's just because of the amount of stretch in it. But it's the same principle as Lee's. Like when I get that strike, I'm going to wind into him and get that slack up, and it's just a pressured hook set. I mean, you wind in tight and lean back as hard as you can. Like you're not going to drop slack to them and slack line them like you would with a jig or a Texas rig or something like that. It's more of a hard pressure hook set.
So you're getting in contact with the fish. You're tightening the line with the reel before you come back with the rod.
Yeah, kind of at the same time. Like when you get that bite, you start winding and lean into them. But and another reason I do that instead of jerking is in case they do short strike it, you're not taking it out of the strike zone.
Right.
And if you jerk when that fish hits it, you might jerk that bait out of the water and it flies 20 or 30 feet back toward the boat. Where if you wind into them and lean, put a hard pressure hook set on them, you're only going to pull that bait 5 or 6 feet if they miss it. And a lot of times you're going to get them to follow up on it and hit it again.
So Brian, the heavier rod is to compensate for the copolymer line or something else?
No, it's not actually that heavy. Like it's a medium heavy, but it's got a pretty fast tip on it.
Okay.
But it just gets to backbone a lot quicker. Like it's not a parabolic rod.
Yeah,
Zell, how about
a cranking rod, right? Crankbait rod.
Yeah.
Do it.
Lee.
I wasn't even paying attention.
Yeah, he's using a Halo cranking rod. I'm paying attention.
Yeah,
Lee,
I'm actually throwing a cranking rod. It's just real parabolic, that soft tip, with the straight braid. Yeah, I thought you said Zell. I'm sorry. I was literally thinking about how many all-star Zell Roland topwater rods I probably still have because I still have I probably have 7 or 8 of them still.
That's awesome. And not to tie a loop knot because of this man.
I do.
All right, Zell, how do you set the hook?
I'm a lot like Lee. I reel down on them, and I don't have to set the hook real hard. I mean, with the hooks that are made today, when it comes to treble hooks, as long as those hooks are like a needle point, you don't really have to put a real hard hook set in them. And then I let the rod load up, and loads up. It's the rod that fights the fish more than the angler fighting the fish. And I'm just a big believer in that parabolic type fishing rod.
BTC, I got one last quirky question. Doesn't really matter. I think I've
None of
so much.
in the big picture, Ken. None of this does.
Well, this is Bass After Dark. This is the most consequential, along with Brian's show, the most consequential shows in bass fishing.
Yes.
But guys, what's your personal best on a topwater lure or on a?
Okay, how much you benching?
Brian, let's start with you.
Oh, I might have to think about it. You may have to start with somebody else.
All right, Lee, I've seen you catch a bunch of good fish. Nothing giant at Gross Savant. They don't have a lot of giants there, but then I watched you weigh in 100 pounds at Forks. So I know you've got some giants on topwater.
Yeah, I've caught an 11.2, I think, on a spook at Fort. But like my biggest tournament bass on Bassmaster would probably be from that day. I think I weighed a 9 something the day I weighed the 42 pounds, and on the spook it was a 9.2 or 3 or 4. Yeah,
you're a modest guy, and you were saying that Brian and Zell were in a different league, but I don't think either of them has ever weighed in 100 pounds of fish on topwater baits, basically.
I have not.
So I think you can hang with anybody out there on the topwater stuff.
Yeah, Fork doesn't count. It's cheat code.
Oh no, it all counts. It all counts. And Zell, how about you? You're best on top.
Boy, it'd be hard. Probably 10 something. I mean, I've caught bigger ones, not in tournaments, but I've caught probably 12 something would be the biggest I've ever caught on topwater.
That's a beast.
Yeah.
Mr. Thrift, when you're not taking hooks off, what's the?
I would say the biggest one I've ever caught on top's probably 8 1/4, something like that. On a boat.
That's a great fish.
Yeah, I've never caught a 10, so
You've never caught a 10-pound bass?
I've never caught a 10-pound bass.
That's
Well,
crazy.
let me read.
Are you serious?
I've caught a 10 with an asterisk beside it. Well,
Which is?
which is I caught it when I was 17 out of a farm pond, and I weighed it on my grandpa's old vegetable scales, with old Rusty Spring. So it weighed somewhere. They said the scale said it weighed 10.7, but I think it was closer to probably 8.5, 9.5. But
Oh, really?
I call it 10.7.
Let's call it 13. Let's just call it 13 and be done with it. That way you got Lee and Zell beat.
There we go.
Yeah. Now I did catch one with JT Kinney filming a fishing show with him down in Florida. It wasn't on topwater, and luckily for me, his scale batteries had died. But I think it was over 10, and he said he thought it was as well, but you never know.
That's a JT. My scales are broken, so your
Yeah.
fish can't possibly be
And,
bigger than mine.
what was bad is during the show, he's like, "Oh, it's like a 9, 9.5," and then after the show, he's like, "Man, I think it was over 10."
Wow.
Of course.
Yeah,
That kind of sandbagging. Come on, JT. You're better than that.
So I've got a question before we end it, because I'm getting ready to go to bed. Major tournament wins, FLW, Bassmaster, MLF, anything like that. Zell and Brian, how many major tournaments have y'all won on topwater? And it doesn't have to be every single fish y'all weighed on topwater, but the majority, 80, 90% of the fish on topwater. How many major wins have y'all had just on topwater?
God, that'd be hard to say. I mean, fishing bass, maybe 2.
I think I'm maybe 1. The only one I can think of where the majority was probably topwater was the TTBC I won at Conroe. I caught a lot of them on a buzz bait the first 2 days.
I got one. It's a buddy tournament on the Delaware.
There you go.
There's probably 12 boats, 15 boats maybe. It's a major event.
That's big time, man. The
Lee,
early classes only had 20 some.
How about you, Lee? 2?
Yeah, just to.
Just 2.
Just over 100 pounds.
In both of those events, you had your trolling motor out of the water and catching them on top water. Is that correct?
At Chick, I did. My first elite was on Chickamauga on a frog.
How about fork?
It was about 50-50. Half the time I was spot locked, half the time I was, wrapped her down.
Yeah. And your thought process there was the fish are here just to chill and be as quiet as possible. So, like, I don't know. That just intrigues me.
Yeah, I win more money with my electronics off and my wrap down than I do anything else usually.
That's awesome. Bryan, have you ever power pulled down for more than 2 casts?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
He's a changed man, dude. He's a slow fisherman now.
I am.
Nice. I've never seen Mike, I've never seen him power pull down for an entire cast. It's usually like the poles go down at the beginning of the cast before the next cast goes out. They're up, you know what I mean? And back on the trolling motor.
Usually when I do it, it's out of desperation.
Is that a sign there's trouble in the thrift boat if you do that?
No, it's just a sign that I've got no other options.
Wow.
Like if I'm going to do good, it's going to happen right there.
I like it. Good indicator.
Well, Bryan, congratulations on your team series win.
Ah, thank you.
Very cool. Yeah. And if anybody hasn't seen the viral video clip of a trolling motor issue that he and his partner Jeff Sprague had, you owe it to yourself to check that out.
Yeah, I figured Bryan might show with a black eye tonight.
No, I was just trying to keep him calm.
So Bryan Thrift, Bass Pro / psychiatrist.
Yeah, and it wasn't a trolling motor issue. I think we just
no.
Like I mean, nothing was wrong.
It goes deeper than that.
There was nothing wrong with the trolling motor. It was just
it goes deeper than the 60-inch shaft of the trolling motor.
That's right.
Yeah, the trolling motor is just in the wrong place for the wrong time.
I'm a fan of Jeff, and thrilled you guys won. That was awesome.
Oh yeah, we had a great time. Caught a lot of fish, and we had a good time together. And to me, I finished second in 2 or 3 of the cups over the last 4 or 5 years, and that was my first ever cup win. So that was pretty cool.
That's right. But you want a red crest, man. What do you want?
I wanted a cup too. Especially when you've been so close. We had one in Florida, and I was leading it with like 30 seconds to go, and a Wheeler catches one like in the last 30 seconds and beat me. So, like the whole day, I'm feeling like I've got it won, and then you lose it in the last 30 seconds. So, I wanted to get me one.
But isn't it cool that under those, well, when you're doing the every fish count stuff and all that, isn't it cool that you know that you've won, you've lost in the last 30 seconds? I think that's really compelling.
Oh, it is. It's a great format. I love fishing like that. I really do. And it just, to me, the worst feeling in bass fishing is not finding out the fish were biting until weigh-in.
Yeah,
that sucks. at least with the MLF format, you know real quick if they're biting or not.
One of the things I always get such a kick out of is I'll be watching the MLF coverage with every fish counts, and Bryan Thrift will have a flurry of action, and they'll show another pro to say, oh, he's probably doing this, and they're wildly wrong. They're always way off.
We all got our speculations of what somebody else is doing, and I'd say 99% of the time we're wrong.
Are they deliberately choosing the wrong guesses because it's funny? Because it is funny. Or do you think it's just you guys, everybody's wrong that often?
Yeah, and I think it's just a testament to how versatile most anglers are nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I mean, the days of, you know, back in the 80s, early 90s, when you had your very technique specific people that dominated, like Fritz dominating with the crankbait, Zell dominating with topwater, Denny dominating flipping a jig. Like you don't see that as much anymore. Because you can't stay out here long enough, because you're only going to get one shot a year to have a good tournament if you're, you know, a one trick pony now. So I think everybody's a lot more versatile, and you've got to cash checks in the game to stay in it now.
I think I'll disagree a little bit there, because I think that the guys have always been, or most of the guys who've been successful have been more versatile than that. I know Denny won some tournaments with a spinnerbait.
Yeah,
but he branded himself very carefully with that flipping stick, and I think that was a smart move. Because you can't, as a guy who's written a lot of articles, you can't write a story about flipping and pitching without including Denny Brower. You can't write a legit story about Topwater without including Zell Roland. But I remember a tournament Zell won on Gunnersville, where he goes out in the morning and he catches a limit like on a pop-ar. And then he knows he can catch some better quality fish. So he starts fishing points with a crankbait, and he replaces every one of those pop-ar fish. And then he picks up a flipping stick and goes to the docks, and he replaces every one of those crankbait fish. I'm probably using the wrong bait example, Zell, but I know you remember the tournament. And that's exactly what you did. You wound up catching 3 limits, and each time you replaced the limit you'd caught on the previous bait.
And which one was on the Zellamander?
You got to unmute Zell. Jacob,
wake up.
Jacob, unmute Zell. Okay, Zell, sorry. Start your answer over if you would.
I said I caught a lot of fish on that Zellamander.
but that Gunnersville tournament you won on the last day, you whacked them multiple different ways. What was the technique you finally used to win and go ahead that day?
I don't think most guys will believe me, but I caught them all flipping a jig under one boat slip.
Wow.
I had 2 tournaments I've won in my lifetime, and I promise you ain't none of these guys. I wish I had the film footage. At Santee Cooper, when I won that BASS event, on the last day, I caught 50 over 5 pounds.
Oh, what? My gosh.
In the fish hatchery.
At Gunnersville, on the last day, I made the camera guy get out of the boat. I put him on the dock. I said, walk all the way down there to the first boat slip on the right. I said, don't walk on the right or left, but sit your camera right there on the dock and frame in the whole back side of that. And when I come around there, let me know when you're ready. And
producer,
I made 4 consecutive flips and had 20 pounds in live well in less than 5 minutes. And then I told him to get in the boat so we could go have some fun. I caught 48 over 5 that last day.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
But it's a guy knows. Edwin Evers was in second place, or he was leading going into the last day. And Edwin idled over to me before takeoff because I knew he was catching his throwing a rattle trap. But I knew he was running out of fish. And Edwin pulled up to me and he said, man, are you going to catch him today? And I started laughing. And he said, what's funny? And I said, you see them buoys out there that we got to idle to before we take off? He goes, yeah. I said, well, I want you to picture this. Before you idle out them buoys this morning, I'm going to have 4 that weigh 20. Day. No.
That's some good trash talk. I like that.
I had them. I mean, there must have been 100 bass under that dock over 5 pounds.
Unbelievable.
It was incredible. But I've only fished 2 tournaments in my lifetime where I could have looked at them guys dead in the face in a meeting and told them to go home. But there's been tournaments Brian's won that he knew he was going to win them.
I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking about it. I don't think I've ever had that.
But
maybe one at U-Fall, I thought there was like a 95% chance I was going to win.
But you know, every tournament I've ever won, for exception of maybe 1 or 2, I knew I was going to win them. Once the event started, I knew it was over going into the last day. And as long as I fished 100% and I didn't make a mistake, I was going to catch them. And it's like watching a golfer hit a golf ball. As long as his swing's right and he plays as good as he knows he can play, he's going to win. And especially when everything falls in his favor. So, you know, I miss fishing as many tournaments as I used to fish. I know that. It's a whole different world.
Would love to see you back out there.
Brian, with the I'm sure you heard the announcement yesterday. On a scale of 1 to 10, how tempted are you to come over to Bassmaster to fish the 0 entry fee trail?
Which one's good and which one's bad? 1 or 10?
10. 10's good.
10's good.
Yeah.
I'll say a 2.
Good
And
answer.
Lee Livesay has diplomatically left the building.
Yes.
It'll be very interesting to see what these organizations do. Bass has had no entry fees before. We've done that, and it
Are you talking about the majors and those elite 50s and stuff?
the elite 50s. We had it was a no entry fee.
Yeah, that was really just you paid a bunch of entry fees and they moved some of the money over to those particular tournaments. But yeah.
Well, that's why they cut the payback with the no entry fee.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
I don't understand why they didn't just say, okay, we're going to just put this extra money into the payout and we're going to reduce your entry fees by an equivalent amount so that payout stays the same, but entry fees fall by a couple $1,000 or whatever. Wouldn't that have made everybody happy and not second guess motivations? Lee Livesay, this question is not directed to you because you have to be diplomatic here.
Yeah, I get done lately for.
Let's not even. Brian, why are we going here? BTC?
Huh?
Yeah, exactly. He's Marshawn Lynch now.
Marshawn Livesay. Oh, somebody on the message board wanted to know the origin of your last name, Lee.
I have no idea.
Yep, that's what I figured. We had Jacob Porosnik in studio one time, and he didn't even know he was Polish. So. I'm not surprised, Lee. Dude didn't know what a freaking what a pierogi was. He knew nothing about heritage.
I know that Zell Roland's middle name is Uzel.
Uzel?
No, his first name is John, I believe.
Oh,
that's right.
Really?
All right.
You ain't supposed to, everybody can.
Sorry, man. My bad. I now know that Bryan Thrift takes his treble hooks off everything he's got in his boat, which is, I think, even more scary.
it's
That's
just
a pretty good idea.
psychopath, man.
He can get like 6 or 7 walking baits in one tray versus 3.
Oh yeah.
Do you tie braid split rings anywhere, Brian?
No,
No.
I don't tie braids split ring. I can't even say it.
You can't tie braid. You can't tie blades. Blades
I
split
do
rings.
tie my own feathers.
Okay.
And he
Yeah,
grows
tie my
them
own
on chickens and other birds that he keeps in the home.
No, but there are differences to feathers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You got the feathers that are like kind of waterproof, like duck feathers that float higher, and then you got like ostrich feathers that absorb water, so they flow and swim a little more naturally and stay underneath the water.
Aha.
If
Zell-
Brian knew was a feather, what kind of feather would he be?
Oh God. I don't know.
Look,
Probably
look.
like, does a platypus have feathers? I know they got bills. Probably a penguin feather.
All right, your best Bryan Thrift story, and then we'll let you go.
Bryan Thrift or Bryan News story?
That one.
My best Bryan News story.
Yeah.
Oh God, we got a lot of them.
Yeah, best one you could tell.
Probably I'm trying to think of a good one. We never really got into too much.
Oh, you went to bed early.
Yeah, we usually would. Probably the best story was, I think he was with me when I did this. I can't remember if he was with me or not. We were at a FLW event at Kentucky Lake, and you know how a lot of anglers will have a dog in the boat with them now? So he was like curled up in the floorboard of the boat while I was idling ledges asleep. And then I dozed off, and I don't know how long it was, but I eventually run into one of those cans on the side of the river, and that woke me up when I bumped into that can idling. I mean, you're out there in June, it's hot and sunny, and the motor's idling, you hear the little waves slapping against the hull. I fell asleep.
It sounds like the most peaceful nap.
Oh yeah, and then all of a sudden you hear dong, you right inside one of those metal river channel buoys.
At least you didn't hit a bluff wall, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know how many schools of fish I idled over and never saw because I was asleep, but I was definitely out.
That's hilarious.
Well, gentlemen, thank you.
We're ended on that, just like that.
I think so. I mean, Ken, what do you got?
Well, I know Lee said he wanted to get to bed.
Yeah.
I know you said you were going to cut Bryan loose. I want Zell to tell a couple of stories before we cut him loose, but I don't know if Lee and Bryan need to go. Guys, we cannot thank you enough. Y'all were terrific. Not just on giving us a lot of great insight into Topwater stuff, but just a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Thank you. Trick or treat.
See y'all later. See you, Zell.
All right, bud.
See y'all.
Take care, Brian.
See you, big.
All right, Zell Roland, you know I love listening to you tell stories. If you got a few minutes, can you lead us off with the U.S. Open story? You got a new van. You're pulling your boat.
Yeah, back in the old days, that was the vehicle to pull a boat with, was a van. And because we traveled, so most of us got a custom van or something. But I'd hooked onto my boat in Las Vegas at the hotel, and because that was the host hotel of the tournament. And it's about probably a 40-minute drive out to the boat ramp at Lake Mead. The road's real windy and curly and real hilly, and I'm maybe an eighth of a mile of the boat ramp. And I started up the hill, and the van, boy, it was going right on up that hill like there wasn't nothing back behind me. And I looked at, I turned, I didn't even look in my mirror to see if the boat was there. I just looked at my co-anchor. I said, man, this van pulls this boat pretty good, don't it? Like it's not even back there. And when I looked into my side mirror, all I dirt, dust. And I said, man, I stopped the van. I said, you're not going to believe this, but the boat's done come on. And oh my gosh, so I threw the van in reverse and we backed up, and everybody else had stopped because they couldn't, of all the dust that flew up. Well, the boat, the receiver was one of them fold down and it locks. Well, that broke. And when it broke, the trailer off, and it goes straight down the side of the mountain. And I looked down there and I said, "Oh my gosh!" And what are we gonna do now? I said, "Look, you go down there and you get all our fishing stuff out of. Just grab some rods and stuff." I was like in 7th place, I think, going into that final day, and I knew Lonnie Stanley wasn't using his boat for the final day. So I said, "Man," I said, "I'm going to run back to the hotel, and the first boat I see, I'm going to hook onto it and bring it back." So it happened to be Lonnie's boat. And when I got back in, Forest Wood, it was a Ranger boat, Forest Wood and them guys, they've got a wrecker and pulled it out. But long story short, wasn't experienced. Back in those days, if it was something bad was going to happen, I was it.
Oh, Zell, we're having some tech issues with you. We're hearing most of what you're saying, but it's not smooth. So we got to have you on again because I still want you to tell the Rob Kilby story in the covered trailer. There's too many Zell stories. The master of disaster, Zell Roland. We got to get too many of them in there. Love you like a brother, my friend. You're awesome and such a great credit to the sport.
Thank you, Ken. If you guys ever need anything, don't hesitate to call me, buddy.
We're gonna do it because we got to get more Zell Rowland stories out there. We got to get you back doing some more tournament fishing. You got too much gas left in the tank.
Oh yeah, I got a lot. All right, bud. Take care.
Take care,
Thanks,
Zell.
Zell.
All right, bye.
That was a fun show.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
a good show. We should do this weekly.
We should. Yeah. Apologies to you guys listening for the last 2 weeks. It was 50% Ken's fault and 50% my fault.
No, more than that. I was on the road some with lousy connectivity. I got sick on the road a little bit, and so it just became kind of tough to
80-20
show together. So yeah, apologies. We're going to do our very best to not make sure that does not happen again. I am on the road probably for 10 or 11 shows a year, and that seems like a lot sometimes. And
Are
a
you
lot of
really?
these hotels, yeah,
10 or 11?
yeah, probably next year. Yeah, between tournaments, I'm going to be at all the NPFL tournaments, which will be 7 events next year, and the Classic and the Red Crest and the ASA Summit, and then there's ICAST. We're both going to be there. It adds up. And when you're on the road, it either means that Brian's got to do the show solo, which he's fabulous.
He hates.
But he hates doing that, or we got to, schedule around it and not do a show that week. So anyway, Brian,
You gotta get that Elon Musk internet.
yeah, maybe that Skylink stuff or whatever they call it. I don't know if that's available where I'm at or not. I'm usually in a nice enough hotel, but it's amazing how lousy the internet service is at most hotels, even some pretty nice ones. Those little bluegill profile prop baits are usually popular in Florida, even much bigger ones.
Well, this is a big one. It's just it's in my hands, so it looks small.
Imagine how tiny it would look in male hands.
Right. Yeah.
Brian's horrified that my hands are slightly
Almost
larger
as
than
big
his.
as mine. Surprisingly large for an indoorsy kind of a guy,
Yeah.
a writer, as they say.
Typer.
Yeah. Well, anyhow.
Do you want to mention Lures and Lead? We appreciate their support.
We do. I have no idea on an update because
Well,
we didn't hear nothing, but
that's okay. I'll just. You want to do the little live read there just to help promote them a little bit?
Lures Lead is an online fishing tackle platform focused on hard to find tackle. Oh, wait.
Oh, Bryan Thrift's going to do it. A sunburned Bryan Thrift.
Oh, it's blurry.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to read that through
Hold on,
that
Brian's
map.
got terrible eyesight. That's Bryan Thrift with a Y, by the way, folks.
Ah, there you go.
He's got terrible eyesight. Now he can see. Lures and Lead is an online fishing tackle platform focused on hard-to-find tackle, custom lures, exclusive colors of popular baits, and unveiling some well-kept bass-catching secrets. They strive to be a must-follow for the tackle geek, but also an educator for new anglers. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram. You never want to know what they're dropping next. And they do. They do. They do a good job of, releasing that stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that's hot and in demand. And I just thought about this tonight. We not only had BTC, but we also had BT.
BT,
Bryan Thrift,
yes, and Indiana Thrift,
and Indiana Thrift, yes,
and Zell's Internet,
and Zell's shaky internet, unfortunately, which I hate because he's got a lot to offer and a lot of amazing stories. And the good news is we'll have him on another time and hopefully have better internet for that. But you know what? We're going to make up for some of those technical glitches right now.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a cool segment that we introduced a few weeks ago, and now it is back.
Would you talk about bad news?
Talk about bad news.
Bad news. We ready to do bad news?
Okay, it looks like I'm back on, but I'm not delivering.
Everybody, hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Bass After Dark, and happy Halloween. Welcome to the second edition of Bad News. I'm your anchor, Justin Kingsley. Let's get to the latest headlines. The Kamala Harris campaign has acknowledged that the candidate's frequent waffling on the issues has been a detriment to her election effort. Her changing views on the border, immigration, abortion, and other major issues appears to be off-putting to a significant part of the electorate. What's wrong with waffling on the issues? Said Bass CEO Chase Anderson. We change our minds all the time, and everybody loves it. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that nearly 250,000 new jobs were created in September. Unfortunately, nearly 200,000 of those were for Bassmaster Elite Series polygraphers. Go get them, boys. Spain recently captured gold at the Bass World Championships at Bolsena Lake in Italy. Team USA Bass, the three-time defending gold medalist, finished fourth, failing to earn a medal. The U.S. team was comprised of Scott Canterbury, Joey Fuentes, Dustin Connell, Scott Martin, Fred Rumbanis, and Jacob Wheeler. Unfortunately, Scott Martin had to leave Italy before competition began to tend to a family matter. Martin was replaced at the last minute by Jacob Wheeler's cameraman. Team officials believe they would have won the championship if they had one more cameraman to replace Scott Canterbury. Really? Italy, though? The new Elite Anglers Union is promising better payouts and more cohesive bargaining with the leaders of major tournament leagues. The union's president, seen here preparing to jet off to meet with Bass and MLF officials, says he's eager to get things off on the right foot and that the border is secure. They'll probably all get along great. Last but not least, drain the dirty MLF swamp, says President Trump. If elected, Donald Trump vows to pardon James Watson from his suspension and launch a federal investigation into MLF angler, sponsor, and CEO Boyd Duckett for operating a Ponzi scheme disguised as a professional fishing league. Shocker. That'll do it, guys, for this edition of Bad News. Appreciate everyone for tuning into this week's episode. Hope everyone enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.
That
Yeah,
was
so
interesting.
for guys, we have our regular producer Nathan is still trick or treating, right? Did we make that announcement?
I don't think we did. We should have. Yeah, Nathan and his wife Emily are out with their young son Cole,
Eating
doing
candy.
trick or treating.
Yes.
Cole is 30 years old. I don't know why he still wants to trick or treat, but there you go. No, Cole is 8 or 9. Anyway, they're having a good time out with Cole, and so Jacob Morrison, who you know from Bad Comments, is our engineer tonight, and doing a great job by and large. A few little glitches, but we're working it out.
Yeah, he's making Nathan look good. I mean, honestly, did he have a chance to practice? Like, nah, nope. We're live. There's no, so I get it. I went through this for 10 years. I still fuck up.
And actually, BTC and I were speaking of Brian going through it for 10 years. He's talking about the time he was producing Ike Live with Mike Iaconelli, Pete Glusick, and that crew. And that's where I first got to know Brian and really enjoyed his work there. But that's where I joke with him. That's where I learned I wanted us to be co-hosts. I didn't want to be a producer.
Yeah, because I sucked at that. And
No, you didn't. You were good at
Ken's
that.
learning this too.
No, my God, no, you were good at that. But
and not
like
just
the personality.
Yeah, but not just that. Jacob also had his wisdom teeth out today.
Yes, and he's feeling it. He's under the influence of some painkillers, I think. So
yeah, Jacob, can you pop in real quick and just tell us how surgery went? Just Jacob.
Hang on.
J-Mo!
What up?
Your cheeks look the same size as normal, bud.
I don't know if he turns a little bit to the side. I think I see some swelling.
Is there a little swelling?
Maybe. I don't know. It went good. In Spain.
Why you sweating?
Does not inhibit it. Does not inhibit my ability to use the internet. That's all.
Well,
that's all.
some would argue with that.
It's all performance.
No, you did great, man. You did great. We appreciate it. It is not easy, especially when you're under the influence of dental painkillers. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry to spring that on you. I didn't mean to.
No, it's all
startle you.
good.
You looked guilty or something like.
Shame on Nathan Benson for putting family ahead of Bass After Dark. Shame on you, Nathan.
Right?
How dare you?
That's right. Jacob, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to tell the people?
I have nothing for the people. Keep listening.
He doesn't speak for Bass After Dark when he says that.
They already knew.
Exactly.
But yes, everybody that we owe you prizes for contests in the past, we'll probably get them to you real soon. We're working on that.
Sweet.
Stephanie, I know we owe you. It's Jacob's fault.
Got to have a scapegoat. Every show needs a scapegoat.
Jacob, I did it for 10 years. Just
I'll take
say
it.
yes.
I'll be all right.
Thank you, buddy.
Yep.
Appreciate you, J-Mo. Absolutely appreciate you.
All right, well, I guess that's it for me, Ken. You just wrap up and take us to do your dark thoughts. And
Not really how the show works. You see, I open the show with a monologue. You close the show with a monologue. In between, we have kind of the meat of the sandwich.
damn it.
By the way, Brian the Carpenter and I were on Ike Live last night with Mike
yes.
Iaconelli. Had a great time there. Really enjoyed, always enjoy visiting with Mike and Brian, of course. And so I want to thank Mike Iaconelli for having us on, and really good time. Check it out if you have a chance.
Yeah. Did you hear Thrift's answer to the question I threw him at the end?
Oh, maybe not. What was the question?
I said on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yes, he said 2.
He said it too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going around.
The
A lot of
worm
twos
has
out there.
turned.
Weird situation, and it's one of those situations we actually talk about that on Ike Live last night. So
Yes. Well, Ken, see you, buddy.
Hasta, bye-bye.
Jacob.
Getting tired.
There it is. Miss you, Nathan. All right, Jake, you ready? The top 10 reasons to believe George Perry's world record bass is a fraud. What is that?
The top 10 reasons to believe George Perry's world record bass is a fraud. Number 10, Perry is on the short list to be inducted into the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. Number 9, Johnny Cochran said the fish couldn't fit in a cooler, and if the fish don't fit, the record's legit. Number 8, the other George W's lie about WMDs was more believable.
Fooled me once. Shame on. It fooled me. We can't get fooled again.
Number 7, an entry from his diary that week states, "Today I think I'll lie and see if I can't win a Field and Stream contest." Number 6, Perry passed an Elite Series polygraph. Number 5, the middle initial in George W. Perry stands for unreliable. Number 4, the famous tackle box from his fish photo is small enough to fit inside Ken's Masters of the Universe lunchbox. Number 3, the IGFA was happy to certify it. Number 2, Donald Trump called it fake news.
You are fake news.
And the number 1 reason to believe George Perry's world record bass is a fraud? Because Ken says so.
I like that list, and I like that it finished with Ken said so. In case anybody didn't like that, I lobbied hard for that one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Thank you to Lee Livesay, Bryan Thrift, and Zell Rowland for coming on and on Halloween, taking time out from trick-or-treating or eating their kids' candy or whatever the hell. Thank you to Jacob for being Nathan tonight. Thank you to Nathan for not showing up and sticking us with Jacob. Justin, good job, buddy. Should be about 2 weeks, and we'll be back for bad news. James Riley for the logo over there. And thank you to Ron Stallings for the intro and all these empty shot glasses. Next week, how do you develop your bass fishing instincts? Guys, don't sleep on this one. Tell a friend. This one should be really, really good. We have been working on this one for a while to get the right panel together. So pretty excited for that one. Again, please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. And now it's time for Dark Thoughts.
Did you go outside last night? Nah, one night. Nah, it's extremely bizarre. Nah. Definitely shock and disbelief.
And now Dark Thoughts by Brian the Carpenter.
This guy's naked.
Hey guys, so it's a busy week for me this week. Kind of weird. Monday night I was on Smallmouth Crush. Wednesday night I was on Ike Live. Tonight here doing this show. If you saw the Smallmouth Crush show, I talked about something, and so this is going to be somewhat of a repeat of that. So I apologize. And I think I've talked about this stuff before. 2 years ago, me and my buddies, Mike and Dave, Tom, we've been friends forever. We went to Venice, Louisiana for a guy's trip. We all turned 50, and we've all been friends since like middle school. So we took this trip to Venice, Louisiana, and 2 of the days we fished 4 days. It's a freaking amazing trip, and the place is insane. Venice is another world, really is. But 2 of the days we fished bull reds and caught absolute giant bull reds. And in this one instance, I've got a 40-something inch bull red on. I think it was a 44 on a bass rod on a chatterbait. And I'm fighting this fish and severely outmatched tackle wise, the whole thing. It was phenomenal. I love that aspect of it. And as I'm fighting this fish, I consciously tell myself, like, just drink in the moment. You know what I mean? Like, slow things down, because a lot of times bass fishing, you have these incredible moments you work so hard for to get this bite and catch this fish, and it's like it's over before it happens. So I wanted to live in the moment, and I wanted to really take it all in. And I told myself, like, dude, drink it in, feel what's going on right now. And as I'm fighting this fish and it's peel and drag and stressing this tackle out to the max. Yeah, I could feel like the reel barely holding on the blank of the rod, and it was fucking awesome. Looking around and looking at this landscape of the Louisiana Delta, which is insane, just the way that whole body sets up. But anyhow, I realized, like, I'm having this amazing moment right now, and like, this moment I've been waiting for forever. He's got this giant fish on and this fishing. It's what I love. And I'm having like the best moment of my life. And on the other end of the line, I'm fighting this fish and I realized in that moment, like, oh my God, this thing is having the worst moment of its life. It's in complete panic mode right now, fighting for its freaking life. And I just kind of thought about that, and like, oh, damn, like I can't have the feelings I'm having without something else having the equal and opposite type of feelings or moment. And I just was dwelling on what that all meant, and it's actually something I've been thinking about for a while. And it relates to a lot of things in life, sports and any competition. You can't have a winner without a loser. And COVID was terrible, but there was actually some good things, like there's nothing all bad. There's nothing. It's just like this balance in life where everything just kind of balances out. As much as COVID sucked, I loved when nobody was on the roads. Everybody was in the house doing what they're told. More open space for me. Anyhow, it just all kind of clicked for me. And then just recently, I going down wormholes on Instagram, and I end up on something. This debate with a Muslim cleric of some sort and a Christian pastor, priest, whatever. And they're having this kind of a debate on this talk show, and the Muslim guy's like really putting it to the Christian guy, like, questioning him on like, well, if your God is the God, if your God is all powerful, why did he have to kill his son? Like, and that doesn't make sense to him, and I get that. Like, okay, put in that context, yeah, that is something that should be questioned. I get that. And the Christian guy responds, he says, he said, because a price had to be paid. And I felt like that connects with everything that I've been thinking about, like a price had to be paid. Same as that fish had to pay that price for me to have a good time. You know what I mean? Same as the Browns fans had to pay a price for everybody else's fans to cheer or whatever, And I don't know. Seems to be the way things work. To think that a sacrifice is not something legitimate or a conspiracy theory. That those Diddy parties weren't, what people say they were. I don't know. Bryan Thrift, you got some crazy ideas, bro. See you guys next week.
Can